Jacob Hart's hands trembled as he pulled the unconscious boy from the raging creek, rainwater mixing with tears he didn't know he could still cry. 3 weeks ago, he'd wanted a wife, just a woman to fill the silence. Instead, fate delivered Lily Monroe and her son Ben, strangers who'd somehow become his entire world. Now, as lightning split the Wyoming sky and Ben's lips turned blue in his arms, Jacob faced a terrifying truth. Love had ambushed his lonely heart, and losing them would destroy him completely. Stay with us until the very end of this frontier tale of unexpected family and second chances. Drop a comment with your city below so I can see how far this story of love and redemption travels across the world. The Wyoming Territory stretched endless and unforgiving under the April sun, a vast expanse of prairie grass and distant mountains that made a man feel both infinite and insignificant all at once. Jacob Hart stood on the porch of his ranch house, a structure of weathered wood and stubborn hope, watching the horizon where sky met earth in a wavering line of heat shimmer. 34 years old, and he'd become a ghost in his own life, moving through days that blurred together like watercolors left too long in the rain. His father had built this ranch with calloused hands and an iron will, carving a life from soil that fought back with every season. When Jacob inherited it 6 years ago, he'd inherited the silence too. The kind that settled into your bones during long winters, that echoed in empty rooms and unanswered questions. The land demanded everything, sunrise to sunset, muscle and sweat, blood when it came to that. But land couldn't hold you at night. Land couldn't laugh at your terrible jokes or make the house smell like fresh bread on Sunday mornings. "You're gonna die alone out here, Jake," his brother Thomas had told him last Christmas, the only time they'd seen each other in 2 years. Thomas had escaped to Denver, traded the frontier for civilization, swapped cattle for a desk job that paid steady and didn't require dodging rattlesnakes. Find yourself a woman before you forget how to talk to people altogether. The words had stung because they rang true. Jacob had watched his reflection in the wash basin that morning, sun-weathered skin, eyes that had seen too many empty dawns, hair that needed cutting, but who was there to look good for? He'd become the thing he'd always pitied, a man so married to his work that he'd forgotten how to live. So he'd done something desperate, something that kept him awake at night with equal parts hope and shame. He'd written a letter to the Mountain Matrimonial Agency in Chicago, a service that matched lonely Western men with women seeking fresh starts. The proprietor, a Mrs. Eleanor Whitmore, had assured him in her response that she specialized in practical arrangements for practical people. Jacob had been brutally honest in his advertisement, figuring false promises would only lead to heartbreak down the road. Rancher 34 seeks wife for partnership in Wyoming Territory. I have 640 acres, a sturdy house, 2 good horses, and a herd that needs tending. I'm no poet and no prize, but I work honest, don't drink hard, and believe in keeping my word. If you're looking for a start and can handle frontier life, I'm your man. No pretense, no pretty lies, just a chance at building something real. The responses had trickled in over 6 weeks. Some letters were desperate, misspelled pleas from women fleeing situations he could only imagine. Others were calculated, asking about property values and inheritance rights before anything resembling personal interest. One woman had sent a photograph so clearly 20 years old that Jacob had almost laughed, almost because the loneliness beneath the vanity was too familiar to mock. But then came Lily Monroe's letter. It arrived on a Tuesday, distinguished from the others by its simple honesty. The paper was cheap, the handwriting careful but unpracticed, as if each word required concentration. She didn't romanticize herself or make promises about love. Instead, she wrote, "Mr. Hart, I read your advertisement and found it refreshingly honest, so I'll offer the same. I'm 26, hardworking, and capable. I can cook, clean, mend, and handle livestock. I'm also a mother to a 5-year-old boy named Ben. His father died 3 years ago. Consumption took him quick. We've been living with my sister in Pennsylvania, but her husband made it clear we've overstayed our welcome. I won't lie and say I'm coming for romance. I'm coming for survival, for a chance to give my son a real home. If you can accept a ready-made family, I can accept a partnership instead of a fairy tale. Yours in hope, Lily Monroe." Jacob had read that letter 17 times before responding. A child. He hadn't considered a child. His ranch was no place for a boy. Too much danger, too much isolation, too much work that required a man's full attention. But something in those words, in the raw admission of need wrapped in dignity, had reached through his defenses. He'd written back that same night, "Miss Monroe, I appreciate your honesty and will match it. I never considered becoming a father, and the thought scares me considerable. But I was raised to believe that turning away a woman and child in need makes a man something less than a man. If you're willing to take a chance on a rough cowboy who doesn't know the first thing about raising a boy, then I'm willing to learn. The train arrives Thursdays. I'll be waiting. Jacob Hart." Now 5 weeks later, Thursday had arrived like a reckoning. Jacob checked his pocket watch for the 15th time, 2:30 in the afternoon. The train from Cheyenne was due at 3 o'clock, weather permitting, track conditions allowing, God willing. He'd bathed that morning, scrubbing away layers of work and worry until his skin was raw. He'd put on his newest shirt, the blue one he saved for church and funerals, and his least worn pair of trousers. His boots were polished to a shine that would last exactly until he stepped off the porch into Wyoming dust. "You look like you're heading to your own hanging," said Charlie Dawson, his nearest neighbor and closest thing to a friend, who'd ridden over to provide moral support and undoubtedly entertainment at Jacob's expense. Charlie was 50-something, weathered as old leather, with a wit as dry as the summer prairie and a heart bigger than most men admitted to having. "Feels similar," Jacob muttered, tugging at his collar. "What the hell was I thinking, Charlie? I don't know anything about women. And a kid? I don't know anything about kids either. What if she takes one look at this place and gets right back on that train?" Charlie spit tobacco juice over the porch rail with practiced precision. "Then she ain't the woman you thought she was from them letters. But my guess? A woman desperate enough to travel 1,000 miles to marry a stranger ain't going to be scared off by a little dust and distance." He paused, studying Jacob with eyes that had seen most everything the frontier could throw at a person. "The real question is, are you going to be scared off by the reality of what you asked for?" The words settled heavy between them. Jacob had spent the last 5 weeks imagining this day, how it would feel to finally have another heartbeat in the house, another voice breaking the silence. But imagination was a kind friend compared to reality's harsh honesty. What if they couldn't stand each other? What if the boy hated him? What if the whole thing was a mistake that he'd spend years trying to undo? "Too late for cold feet now," Charlie said, nodding toward the east. "Unless I miss my guess, that's your train coming in." Sure enough, a dark plume of smoke rose against the horizon, growing larger by the minute. The distant whistle carried across the prairie, a lonely sound that somehow made the vast emptiness feel even more pronounced. Jacob's heart kicked against his ribs like a spooked horse. They rode into town together, Charlie keeping up a steady stream of commentary about everything except the situation at hand, the price of cattle, the weather predictions, old Henry Morrison's new bull that was mean as a snake and twice as ugly. Jacob barely heard him. His mind was spinning through scenarios, each more disastrous than the last. Carbon Springs wasn't much of a town, a main street with a general store, a saloon, a church that doubled as a schoolhouse, and a handful of other buildings that served the scattered ranching community. The train station was little more than a covered platform and a tiny office where Station Master Brooks sold tickets and gossiped with equal efficiency. A small crowd had already gathered. Frontier entertainment being scarce, the arrival of a mail-order bride was news worth witnessing. Jacob recognized most of the faces. The Hendersons, who ran the general store. Widow Jameson, whose nosiness was legendary. Young Billy Pierce, who probably should have been working instead of gawking. And Father McCarty, whose presence might have been pastoral concern or simple curiosity. "Jacob!" Mrs. Henderson called out, waving with the enthusiasm of someone who'd probably already planned the wedding in her head. "How exciting! A new woman in town, and with a little one, too. You must be over the moon." "Yes, ma'am," Jacob managed, tipping his hat. Over the moon and scared senseless, he thought, but didn't say. The train grew larger, its rhythmic chugging growing louder until it dominated every other sound. Steam hissed, brakes squealed, and with a final shudder of metal and wood, the 315 from Cheyenne came to a stop. Jacob's hands were sweating despite the spring chill. He wiped them on his trousers and immediately regretted it. Now he'd have to shake her hand with damp palms like some nervous schoolboy. The conductor, a portly man with magnificent whiskers, stepped down first and placed a wooden stool for passengers to disembark. An older gentleman emerged, followed by a drummer carrying sample cases. Then, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the train car, a figure appeared in the doorway. She was smaller than Jacob had imagined, more delicate. The photograph she'd sent had shown a serious face with dark hair pulled back, but the reality was somehow both less and more than the image. She wore a faded blue dress that had seen better days but was clean and carefully mended. A carpet bag hung from one hand. Her dark hair was indeed pulled back, revealing a face that was pretty in a quiet way. Not the kind of beauty that stopped traffic, but the kind that grew on you like a favorite song. But it was the boy that froze Jacob in place. He emerged from behind her skirts like a shadow, small for 5 years old, with dark curls that fell over his forehead and eyes that seemed too large for his thin face. He clutched a battered stuffed horse, its fabric worn smooth by countless nights of comfort. The boy's gaze swept the platform, taking in the strangers, the foreign landscape, the vast sky that probably looked impossibly big compared to Pennsylvania. Those eyes, wary, cautious, carrying a weight no child should bear, locked onto Jacob. The boy didn't smile, didn't wave, didn't show any of the excitement a child might feel at a new adventure. He just looked at Jacob with an expression that seemed to ask, "Are you going to hurt us?" Jacob's carefully planned greeting evaporated. All the words he'd rehearsed during sleepless nights vanished like morning mist. He stood there, a grown man rendered speechless by a woman and a child who'd traveled 1,000 miles on the strength of desperate letters and fragile hope. Lily Monroe descended the steps, one hand holding her dress clear, the other maintaining contact with her son. When her feet touched Wyoming soil, she paused, taking a breath that seemed to steady herself for whatever came next. Then she looked directly at Jacob. "Mr. Hart?" Her voice was softer than he'd expected, with a slight tremor that betrayed her nerves. "Yes, ma'am," Jacob said, finding his voice, though it came out rougher than intended. He stepped forward, very aware of the audience watching this moment like it was a stage play. "I'm Jacob Hart. You must be Miss Monroe." "Mrs. Monroe," she corrected gently, then seemed to catch herself. "Though I suppose, well, the circumstances are unusual." A faint blush colored her cheeks. "That they are," Jacob agreed. An awkward silence stretched between them, filled by the hiss of the train and the not-so-subtle whispers of the onlookers. The boy pressed closer to his mother, his free hand gripping her skirt. Jacob dropped to one knee, bringing himself to the child's level. It seemed the right thing to do, though he had no experience to guide him. "You must be Ben," he said, keeping his voice gentle. "I'm Jacob. That's a fine horse you've got there." Ben looked at the stuffed animal, then back at Jacob, but said nothing. The wariness in his eyes didn't diminish. "He's shy around strangers," Lily said quickly, a hand dropping protectively to her son's shoulder. "The journey was long and everything is so new." "No need to explain," Jacob said, rising to his full height. "It's a lot for anyone, let alone a young boy." He meant it. The kid had every right to be cautious. What kind of mother drags her child across the country to marry a stranger? A desperate one. And what kind of man agrees to it? A lonely one. "Your belongings?" Jacob asked, looking toward the train. "Just the carpet bag," Lily said. We travel light." The simple statement held volumes of untold story. A life reduced to what could fit in a single bag. Possessions shed like skin when survival demanded it. Jacob took the bag from her, noting its lack of weight, and gestured toward where Charlie waited with the wagon. "The ranch is about an hour's ride," he said. "I've got the wagon fixed up with some blankets. It's not comfortable, but it's better than it could be." As they walked through the dispersing crowd, Mrs. Henderson intercepted them with the determination of a woman on a mission. "Mrs. Monroe, welcome to Carbon Springs. You simply must come to the church social next Sunday. We're all dying to get to know you properly." "That's kind of you," Lily murmured, clearly overwhelmed. "And this little angel," Mrs. Henderson continued, reaching toward Ben, who immediately retreated behind his mother. "Oh my, he is shy, isn't he? Well, no matter. We'll fix that soon enough. Nothing like a frontier community to bring a child out of his shell." Jacob saw Lily's smile tighten, saw her hand protectively pull Ben closer, and felt an unexpected surge of something. Protectiveness, maybe, or just annoyance at Mrs. Henderson's overwhelming enthusiasm. "We should get moving," he said, more curtly than intended.
It'll be dark before we know it. They made their escape to the wagon, where Charlie waited with unconcealed curiosity.
Jacob made quick introductions, noting how Lily's handshake was firm despite her obvious exhaustion, how Ben hid completely behind her when Charlie tried to greet him. "Pleasure, ma'am," Charlie said, tipping his hat. "And young man, Jacob here's been spinning like a top waiting for you. Haven't seen him this worked up since the time a mountain lion got in with the calves." "Charlie," Jacob warned. "What? It's true. You've been—" "Don't you have cattle to tend?" Charlie grinned, unbothered by the dismissal. "Reckon I do. You folks have a good evening now. Mrs. Monroe, you're going to do just fine out here. Jacob's a good man, even if he doesn't know how to talk about it." With a final wave, he mounted his horse and rode off, leaving them in awkward silence. Jacob helped Lily and Ben into the wagon bed, where he'd arranged blankets and even a pillow he'd borrowed from his own bed. The boy clutched his stuffed horse and burrowed into his mother's side, those big eyes watching Jacob's every move. The ride began in silence, broken only by the creak of wheels and the steady clop of hooves. Jacob tried several times to start a conversation, but words failed him. "What did you say to a woman you'd agreed to marry based on letters? How did you talk to a child who looked at you like you might be a threat?" "The ranch," Lily finally said, her voice carrying forward from the wagon bed. "What's it like?" Jacob considered his answer carefully. "It's basic. I won't lie and say it's fancy because it's not. But the house is solid. My father built it to last. 3 rooms, a main room with the kitchen and my bed, a loft I use for storage, and a small room that's been empty since always." He glanced back. "I thought the boy could have that room. I can sleep in the main room, and you could have the loft. It's not much for privacy, but it's what there is." He saw her absorb this information, saw her recognize the awkward reality of their situation. They were supposed to be getting married, would be expected to share a bed, to build a life as husband and wife. But they were strangers. The intimacy implied by marriage seemed impossible when they hadn't even had a real conversation. "That's thoughtful," she said carefully. "Thank you." More silence. Then tentatively, "Your letters mentioned cattle. How many?" "About 200 head right now. Lost some to the winter. It was harsh. But the survivors are strong, and I'm hoping for a good calving season." He was talking too much about cattle, he knew, but it was safer than the personal questions hovering between them. "Do you manage it all yourself?" "Mostly. Charlie helps during roundup and branding. Sometimes I hire a hand or two for the heavy seasons, but mostly it's just me." He paused. "Just me until now, I suppose." "I can help," Lily said quickly. "I know I'm a woman, but I'm strong. I've worked fields, tended animals. I won't be a burden, Mr. Hart. I'll earn my keep." The desperation in her voice cut at him. "I don't doubt your work ethic, Mrs. Monroe. Your letters made that clear. And you don't need to earn anything. If we're doing this, we're partners. That's what I offered, and that's what I mean." He felt rather than saw her relax slightly in the wagon behind him. The landscape rolled past, endless prairie dotted with sage and the occasional stand of cottonwood trees marking where water ran. Mountains loomed in the distance, still capped with snow that would feed the creeks through summer. It was beautiful in its harsh way, but Jacob tried to see it through their eyes. A woman from green Pennsylvania hills and a boy who'd probably never seen horizons this vast. "It's so big," Lily whispered, and Jacob wasn't sure if she was talking to him or just thinking aloud. "So empty." "Takes getting used to," he admitted. "The space, I mean. Some people love it. Others—" He trailed off, thinking of the families who'd tried and failed, who'd been broken by the isolation and the work and the sheer indifference of the land. "I'm not afraid of empty spaces," Lily said, and there was steel beneath the softness. "I'm more afraid of crowded ones where there's no room to breathe." Jacob understood. She was running from something, maybe just poverty and dependence, maybe something worse. The frontier was full of people escaping old lives, hoping the distance and the difficulty would scour them clean, make them new. They crested a rise, and there it was. The Hart Ranch spread out below them. The house sat in a shallow valley, protected from the worst of the winter winds by a low ridge. The barn stood beside it, newer than the house, with a corral and a small chicken coop Jacob had built last year. A creek wound through the property, lined with cottonwoods that would leaf out green in a few weeks. Beyond that, pasture land stretched to where the cattle grazed as scattered dark shapes against the grass. Jacob pulled the wagon to a stop, giving them a moment to take it in. It wasn't much. He saw that clearly now, through the eyes of newcomers. Just a rough ranch in rough country, miles from anything that resembled civilization. No neighbors within shouting distance, no stores or churches or schools within easy reach. Just land and sky and the constant work of survival. "It's perfect," Lily said, and the catch in her voice made Jacob turn. Tears streaked her face, but she was smiling, the first real smile he'd seen from her. Ben had emerged from his mother's side enough to peer at the ranch, his expression unreadable. "Perfect?" Jacob repeated, disbelief clear in his voice. "It's ours," she said simply. "Or it could be. A place where we belong. Do you know how long it's been since I could say that? Since Ben could say that?" Jacob didn't know how to respond to the raw emotion in her words. He'd offered partnership, a practical arrangement to solve mutual loneliness. But hearing her speak, seeing those tears, he realized she'd invested far more hope in this than he'd understood. The weight of responsibility settled heavier on his shoulders. "Let's get you inside," he said gruffly, uncomfortable with the emotion. "You must be exhausted." The wagon rolled down the gentle slope toward the house. Chickens scattered as they approached, squawking their indignation. Jacob's dog, a blue heeler named Scout, emerged from the barn and raced toward them, barking an alert that turned to excited greeting when he recognized Jacob. Ben made a small sound, the first Jacob had heard from him, and pressed back against his mother as the dog approached. "Scout, sit," Jacob commanded, and the dog obeyed instantly, though his tail continued to wag with desperate enthusiasm. "He's friendly," Jacob told Ben. "Wouldn't hurt a fly unless it was threatening the chickens. You like dogs?" Ben didn't answer, but his grip on the stuffed horse loosened slightly, his eyes fixed on Scout. Jacob helped Lily down from the wagon, acutely aware of how small her waist was under his hands, how she seemed to weigh almost nothing. Undernourished, he realized. The letters had mentioned hard times, but seeing the evidence in her thin frame and the boy's two prominent ribs made it real in a way words hadn't. The house waited, looking more shabby than Jacob remembered. The porch sagged slightly on one side. He'd been meaning to fix that for months. The door needed painting. The windows could use a washing. All the little maintenance tasks he'd let slide because who was there to see? Who was there to care? Now someone was here. Two someones who'd traveled 1,000 miles based on his promise of a home. Jacob pushed open the door and they stepped into his world, the world he was asking them to share. The main room was exactly as he'd left it that morning. His bed against the far wall, roughly made. The kitchen area with its wood stove, rough-hewn table, and mismatched chairs. Shelves holding provisions and the few personal items he owned. It was clean because Jacob hated dirt, but spare because he'd never seen the point in decoration. The walls were bare wood. The floor was uncovered planks. A single lamp sat on the table. It was, Jacob realized with sinking certainty, depressing as hell. Lily stood in the center of the room, Ben clutched to her side, and Jacob watched her take it all in. He waited for disappointment, for regret, for the tears that would mean he'd failed before they'd even started. Instead, she set down her carpet bag and began moving through the space with purpose. "The stove works well?" she asked, running a hand over its surface. "Yes, ma'am. I keep it maintained. And the table seems sturdy." She tested it with a slight push. "Built it myself. There's a good draft from the window. That's useful for summer." She was cataloging, he realized, taking inventory like a general surveying a battlefield. "The small room you mentioned?" Jacob led her to a door off the main room. The space beyond was tiny, barely big enough for a bed and perhaps a small chest. A window looked east toward the sunrise. Dust motes danced in the afternoon light, slanting through cloudy glass. "I could make this work," Lily said, more to herself than to him. Some curtains for the window, a proper bed. Ben's never had his own room before. He's been sleeping on a mat in the kitchen at my sister's house. Ben had followed them and now stood in the doorway, looking into what might become his space. Something flickered across his face. Not quite hope, but maybe the shadow of it. "There's a chest in the barn I could bring in," Jacob offered, "and I can build a bed frame. Got plenty of lumber." "You build furniture?" "I build whatever needs building. Not fancy, but functional." For the first time, Lily looked directly at him,
really looked, as if seeing him as a person rather than just the stranger who'd agreed to marry her. "You're different than I expected," she said. "How so?" "I don't know. Gentler, maybe. Your letters were so businesslike." "Didn't know what else to be," Jacob admitted. "I've never done this before, any of this. I figured honesty was the safest course." "It was the right course," Lily assured him, then squaring her shoulders as if preparing for something difficult. "We should talk about the arrangements. The marriage arrangements." Jacob's collar suddenly felt too tight. "I suppose we should." Ben, sensing the adult conversation entering territory he shouldn't hear, had wandered back to the main room where Scout sat hopefully by the door. The boy kept his distance but was watching the dog with cautious interest. Lily spoke quietly, her voice steady despite the blush coloring her cheeks. "I understand what marriage typically entails, Mr. Hart, but I also understand that ours is unusual. I don't expect, that is, I won't demand—" She stopped, gathering her thoughts. "What I mean to say is, I'm willing to be a wife in all ways eventually, if that's what you want. But I'd like the chance to know you first, to let Ben settle, to build some trust before it becomes that kind of arrangement." Jacob felt relief flood through him so strongly he nearly sagged. "I was hoping you'd say that. Last thing I want is for you to feel obligated or forced into anything. We've got time, Mrs. Monroe. We can take things slow, figure each other out, see if this can work as more than just a practical arrangement." "You're sure?" Doubt flickered in her eyes. "Some men would expect immediate fulfillment of marital duties." "I'm not some men," Jacob said firmly. "And I meant what I said about partnership. Partners should have a say in things, including timing." The tension in Lily's shoulders eased. "Thank you," she whispered. "But we should probably get actually married sooner rather than later," Jacob continued. "People talk, and I don't want your reputation damaged. Father McCarty could do it this Sunday if you're willing. Just a simple ceremony, legal and proper, so there's no question about your place here." "This Sunday? That's only 3 days away. Too soon?" Lily considered, then shook her head. "No, you're right about the talk. And honestly, Mr. Hart, I'd feel better with it official. Right now I feel like I'm visiting. Like this could all disappear if you change your mind." "I won't change my mind," Jacob said, and meant it. He'd made a commitment, and Hart men honored their commitments. They returned to the main room where Ben had inched slightly closer to Scout. The dog's tail thumped hopefully against the floor. "Are you hungry?" Jacob asked, addressing both of them. "I'm not much of a cook, but I've got salt pork, beans, and some bread from the last time I made it to town." "I can cook," Lily said immediately, "if you'll show me where things are." "Mrs. Monroe, you just traveled—" "Please," she interrupted, "let me help. I need to do something useful or I'll go mad thinking about everything that's happened today." Jacob showed her the provisions: flour, sugar, coffee, dried beans, salt pork, a few precious eggs from his hens, some root vegetables from the cellar. Not much compared to what a proper household might have, but enough to survive on. Lily rolled up her sleeves, revealing arms that were thin but corded with muscle from hard work. "I can make something of this. Ben, sweetheart, can you sit at the table for Mama? I'll fix you something to eat soon." Ben obeyed silently, climbing into one of the chairs with his stuffed horse. He watched his mother move around the unfamiliar kitchen with wide eyes, watched Jacob trying to stay out of her way in the limited space. "I should tend the animals," Jacob said, grateful for an excuse to escape the awkwardness. "Evening chores, I'll be back in an hour or so." Outside, the familiar routine centered him. He fed the chickens, gathered eggs, checked on the horses, and threw hay to the cattle that had wandered near the barn. Scout followed at his heels, occasionally glancing back toward the house, as if he too was uncertain about these changes to their routine. "What do you think, boy?" Jacob asked the dog. "Did I make a terrible mistake?" Scout cocked his head, offering no judgment. The truth was, Jacob didn't know what to think. The reality of Lily and Ben was so different from the abstract idea of getting a wife. They were real people with real needs, real fears, real hopes. The boy hadn't spoken a word. Was that normal? Would he ever warm up, or would Jacob always be the stranger who disrupted his life? And Lily, She was trying so hard to be useful, to prove her worth, as if she feared he'd send her away if she wasn't perfect. The weight of responsibility pressed down. He'd taken on the care of 2 lives, 2 souls who depended on him for everything. One wrong move, one failure to provide or protect, and he could destroy them. When he returned to the house, the smell of cooking food greeted him, something that smelled infinitely better than his usual burnt beans and tough pork. The lamp was lit, casting a warm glow over the room. Lily had found the tablecloth he'd forgotten he owned and spread it over the table. 3 places were set with his mismatched plates and utensils. "I hope you don't mind," Lily said, stirring something on the stove. "I found the cloth in the chest, and I thought—" "It's good," Jacob said. "Real good. I'd forgotten about that cloth. My mother made it, years ago." Something crossed Lily's face, understanding perhaps that he too had losses, that he too was alone for reasons written in the past. Dinner was a revelation. Somehow she'd transformed his basic provisions into a meal that actually had flavor. The salt pork was fried crisp, the beans seasoned with something that made them taste like more than just sustenance. And she'd made biscuits, actual biscuits, that were fluffy and warm. They ate in near silence, the only sound the scrape of utensils and Ben's occasional small noises as he ate. The boy consumed his food with the intensity of someone who'd known real hunger, and Jacob made a mental note to ensure there was always plenty. "This is excellent, Mrs. Monroe," Jacob said. "Best meal I've had in years, probably." A small smile touched her lips. "It's nothing special." "It is to me." After dinner, Lily insisted on cleaning up while Jacob brought in the chest from the barn and set about building a simple bed frame for Ben. The work was familiar, soothing, measuring, cutting, fitting pieces together. He was aware of Lily moving around the house, of Ben watching him work with those cautious eyes. "You want to help?" Jacob asked the boy, offering a small piece of wood. "You could sand this smooth with this cloth. Just rub back and forth like this." Ben looked at his mother, seeking permission. At her nod, he slowly took the wood and cloth. His movements were tentative at first, then gained confidence as he understood the task. "That's good," Jacob encouraged. "You're a natural." The faintest hint of something like pride flickered across Ben's face before the caution returned. By the time full dark had fallen, the small room had been transformed. The bed frame was assembled, fitted with a mattress Jacob had stuffed with fresh straw and topped with blankets. The chest sat in the corner. Lily had found a crate and covered it with cloth to make a small bedside table. A candle in a holder provided light. "What do you think, Ben?" Lily asked softly. "Your very own room." Ben stood in the doorway, taking it all in. Then, in a voice so quiet Jacob almost missed it, the boy spoke his first words. "Is it really mine?" The question broke something in Jacob's chest. How could a 5-year-old sound so uncertain about claiming space in the world? "It's really yours," Jacob confirmed, dropping to one knee to meet the boy's eyes. "For as long as you're here, this is your room, your space. You can keep your toys here, sleep here, come here when you need quiet. It's yours." Ben looked at his mother, then back at Jacob, processing this information. Then he walked slowly into the room, climbed onto the bed, and lay down with his stuffed horse clutched to his chest. The exhaustion of travel and stress finally claimed him, and within minutes, he was asleep. Lily stood in the doorway, tears sliding silently down her face. "Did I say something wrong?" Jacob asked, worried. "No," she whispered. "You said something perfectly right. He's never had anything that was just his, never had a man speak to him with kindness. His father was good, but he was sick for so long. And my sister's husband—" She stopped, but Jacob heard volumes in the silence. "You're safe here," Jacob said firmly. "Both of you. That's a promise." She looked at him with an expression he couldn't quite read. "I'm beginning to believe you, Mr. Hart." They stood there for a moment, 2 strangers bound by circumstance, watching a small boy sleep in a room that smelled of fresh lumber and new beginnings. "I should let you rest," Jacob said finally. "The loft is ready for you. I'll be down here if you need anything. There's a lock on the loft door if you want privacy." "Thank you," Lily said, "for everything, for taking us in, for being patient with Ben, for—" She gestured around, encompassing the room, the ranch, the whole improbable situation. For giving us a chance. We're all taking chances here, Jacob replied. Let's just hope they pay off for all of us. He showed her to the loft, a space he'd hastily cleaned that afternoon with a better mattress than his own and blankets that were newer. She looked at it with the same expression she'd given the whole ranch, as if it were luxury rather than rough frontier living. Good night, Mr. Hart, she said. Jacob, he corrected gently. If we're going to be married in 3 days, maybe we should use first names. Jacob, she repeated, testing it. Good night, Jacob, and my name is Lily, not Mrs. Monroe, just Lily. Good night, Lily. He listened to her footsteps on the loft floor, the creak of the bed as she settled, and then silence. Scout curled up on the floor by Jacob's bed, and the house settled into night sounds. Wind against the walls, the distant howl of coyotes, the small creaks and groans of wood adjusting to the day's heat fading. Jacob lay awake for a long time, staring at the ceiling, trying to process the day. This morning, he'd been alone. Now there were 3 heartbeats in his house instead of 1. There was a woman in his loft who'd trusted him with her life and her son's future. There was a boy sleeping in a room Jacob had built, clutching a stuffed horse as if it were the only constant in a world of change. The responsibility terrified him. But underneath the fear was something else, something he hadn't felt in so long he'd almost forgotten its name. Hope. Maybe, just maybe, this desperate gamble could become something real. Maybe 3 broken, lonely people could build something whole. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched vast and indifferent, full of dangers and hardships that would test them all. But inside these walls, for the first time in years, Jacob's house felt less like a shelter and more like what Lily had called it, a home. The Wyoming dawn broke cold and clear, painting the eastern sky in shades of rose and gold that would have been beautiful if Jacob had been awake to see them. Instead, he jolted from sleep to the sound of movement in his kitchen, the clatter of a pot, the scrape of a chair, sounds that didn't belong in his solitary morning routine. For a disoriented moment, he'd forgotten. Then it all came rushing back. The train station, Lily and Ben, the wedding planned for Sunday, the reality of no longer being alone. He dressed quietly, running fingers through his hair in a futile attempt at grooming, and emerged from behind the curtain he'd rigged last night to give himself some privacy. Lily stood at the stove, already dressed despite the early hour, her hair braided and pinned in a neat coronet. The smell of coffee filled the air, real coffee, not the weak brew he usually made. "I'm sorry if I woke you," she said without turning around. "I'm used to early mornings, and I thought I'd make myself useful." "You don't need to apologize for making coffee," Jacob said, his voice still rough with sleep. "Though I should probably warn you, I'm not much for conversation before I've had at least 1 cup. A small smile touched her lips. "Noted." They moved around each other carefully in the small space, like dancers learning unfamiliar steps. Jacob poured coffee, savoring the first bitter sip, while Lily cracked eggs into a pan. Through the open door of the small room, he could see Ben still sleeping, curled around his stuffed horse. "He sleeps late?" Jacob asked. "He had nightmares most of the night," Lily said quietly. "New place, strange sounds." He finally settled around 3 o'clock. Guilt pricked at Jacob. "I should have warned you about the coyotes. They sound closer than they are." "It wasn't the coyotes," Lily said, her hand stilling on the wooden spoon. "Ben has nightmares most nights. Has for over a year now. He dreams about his father dying, about being sent away, about—" She stopped, pressing her lips together. "About things that happened at my sister's house." The implication hung heavy in the air. Jacob wanted to ask, wanted to know what had driven them to such desperate measures, but her rigid posture warned against pressing. "He's safe here," Jacob said instead. "Whatever came before, it stays before." "Fresh start, remember?" Lily's shoulders relaxed fractionally. "Fresh start," she echoed, like a prayer. They ate breakfast in companionable silence, and Jacob found himself studying her when he thought she wasn't looking. In daylight, he could see details he'd missed at the train station, the faint scar above her left eyebrow, the calluses on her hands that matched his own, the way she ate with careful precision as if rationing were still necessary despite the full plate. She caught him staring. "What is it?" "Just thinking you don't look much like your photograph," he admitted. Is that disappointment I hear? No, he said quickly. Just observation. The photograph was older, I think. 3 years, she confirmed, from before Thomas died. I was different then. Weren't they all different before loss carved them into new shapes? Jacob understood that better than most. Ben emerged as they were finishing breakfast, his hair a wild tangle and his eyes still heavy with sleep. He paused in the doorway of his room, taking in the scene, his mother at ease in a strange kitchen, a strange man at the table. An uncertainty crossed his face. "Good morning, sweetheart," Lily said warmly. "Are you hungry?" Ben nodded but didn't move closer. "Come on then," she encouraged. "Mr. Hart doesn't bite, I promise." Jacob corrected. "And your mama's right. I save all my biting for ornery cattle." The joke fell flat. Too soon, too unfamiliar, but Ben did inch toward the table.
Lily fixed him a plate with the last of the eggs and a biscuit left from last night. The boy ate mechanically, his eyes darting between the adults. "I need to check the herd this morning," Jacob said. "Make sure they weathered the night without trouble. Usually takes a few hours." "Can I help?" Lily asked immediately. Jacob hesitated. "It's rough riding, and—" "I can ride," she said firmly. "I grew up on a farm, remember? I've been on horses since I was younger than Ben." The challenge in her eyes was clear. She wouldn't be treated as delicate or useless. Jacob respected that, even as he worried about pushing her too hard too soon. "All right," he agreed. "But Ben—" "I can watch Ben," came a voice from the doorway. Charlie Dawson stood there, hat in hand, grinning like he'd won a prize. "Figured I'd check on how the first night went. Didn't expect to find the little lady already working you to the bone, Jake." "Charlie," Jacob said with a warning tone. "What? I'm offering free childcare. That's neighborly." Charlie addressed Lily directly. "Ma'am, I've got 6 grandchildren of my own back in Kansas. I know my way around young'uns. The boy and I can get acquainted while you two check cattle." Lily looked uncertain, her protective instincts clearly warring with the practical need for help. Ben had pressed himself against her side at the stranger's arrival. "Ben," she said gently, "this is Mr. Dawson. He's Mr. Hart's friend and our neighbor. Would you be all right staying with him while Mama helps with the cattle?" Ben's grip on her skirt tightened, and he shook his head frantically. "Or," Charlie said, dropping into a crouch to meet Ben's eye level, "the boy could come with you. I've got an old mare, gentle as a lamb, that could carry double. The little fellow could ride with you, ma'am, while Jacob and I handle the rough work." It was a good solution, and Lily's relief was visible. "Would you like that, Ben? To see the cattle?" Ben looked at his mother, then at the door leading to the vast outdoors, and finally gave a small nod. An hour later, they were mounted and moving across the prairie. Lily rode behind Jacob on his gelding, Rex, while Ben sat in front of her on Charlie's mare, Daisy. The boy had been terrified at first, clutching the saddle horn with white knuckles, but Lily's steady presence and soft reassurances had gradually eased his fear into cautious wonder. "Look at all the space," Ben whispered, the first voluntary words Jacob had heard from him. "It goes on forever, doesn't it?" Lily replied. "Can you see the mountains way out there?" "They're so big," Ben breathed. Jacob felt something shift in his chest. The boy was talking, engaging with the world rather than just surviving in it. It was a small thing, but it felt monumental. They found the herd scattered across the south pasture, grazing contentedly. Jacob and Charlie began the familiar work of counting, checking for injuries or illness, making mental notes of which cows were close to calving. Lily watched intently, asking questions that showed she understood more about ranching than Jacob had expected. "That one there," she said, pointing to a red heifer standing apart from the others. "She's favoring her left front leg." Jacob looked closer and saw she was right. "Good eye. Probably stepped in a prairie dog hole. I'll need to bring her in. Check for breaks." "How do you catch her?" Ben asked, his voice small but curious. "Well now," Charlie said, "that's where the real skill comes in. Watch your new paw work, boy." Jacob shot Charlie a look. Too soon for that kind of talk. But the damage was done. Ben had tensed again, the brief openness closing like a door. Jacob rode slowly toward the heifer, reading her body language, anticipating her movements. When she tried to bolt, he was ready, cutting her off, using Rex's bulk to guide her where he wanted. It took 15 minutes of patient work, but eventually he had a rope on her and was leading her back toward the others. That was amazing, Ben said, the words bursting out before he could stop them. Then, as if realizing he'd shown too much enthusiasm, he shrank back against his mother. "You think that's something," Charlie said. "You should see him during a real roundup. Man moves like he's part of the horse." They worked through the morning, the sun climbing higher and warming the spring air. Jacob found himself hyper-aware of Lily's presence, the way she sat straight in the saddle despite hours of travel yesterday, the way she pointed out things to Ben, turning the work into education. She was good with the boy, patient but not coddling, encouraging his curiosity while respecting his fears. "There's a calf tangled in brush over there," Lily called out, pointing to a small brown shape struggling near the creek. Jacob saw it immediately and cursed under his breath. "Must have wandered off during the night. Damn fool creature." "Language," Lily said mildly, nodding toward Ben. Jacob felt his face heat. "Sorry. Darn fool creature." They dismounted and approached the calf carefully. It was well and truly stuck, the brambles wrapped around its legs and caught in its developing horns. The mother cow stood nearby, lowing anxiously but not sure how to help her baby. "Easy now," Jacob murmured, working to free the tangled legs. The calf thrashed, making it harder. Someone needs to keep it still. Without hesitation, Lily was there, her hands gentle but firm on the calf's head, speaking in low, soothing tones. The calf settled under her touch, and Jacob was able to work the brambles free. When it was done and the calf bounded back to its mother, Lily's dress was covered in mud, and her hands were scratched from thorns. "You all right?" Jacob asked. "I'm fine," she said, examining her hands. "Just scratches." "Mama's tough," Ben said to Charlie, a note of pride in his voice. "She's the toughest person I know." Lily's eyes shone with sudden tears, and Jacob understood. The boy was defending her, claiming her strength in a world that had probably told them both they were weak. "I believe it," Jacob said seriously. "Takes a strong person to travel 1,000 miles to build a new life." Charlie nodded agreement. "And to wrangle a calf like that? Most fine ladies would have fainted at the thought." "I'm not a fine lady," Lily said, but there was no bitterness in it, just statement of fact. "I'm a working woman who does what needs doing." "Best kind of woman for ranch life," Jacob said, and meant it. They headed back toward the ranch as noon approached, the injured heifer trailing behind on a lead. Ben had relaxed enough to ask questions, careful, quiet questions about the animals, the land, the work. Jacob answered each one, surprised by the boy's quick understanding. "Do the cows have names?" Ben asked. "Not usually," Jacob admitted. "Too many to name, but there's a few special ones. That big black one there, the one with the white face, that's Bessie. She's the herd boss, tells all the others what to do." "Like Mama tells me what to do?" "Exactly like that." Ben considered this. "Are you the boss of Mama now?" The question hung in the air, loaded with implications. Jacob chose his words carefully. "Your Mama and I are partners, Ben. That means we both get a say in things. Neither of us is the boss of the other." "But you're bigger," Ben pointed out with child logic. "Bigger doesn't mean boss," Lily interjected. "Remember how Papa was sick, but he was still grown up? Size and strength aren't the same as being in charge." Jacob saw the shadow cross both their faces, the memory of loss, of a man diminished by illness. He changed the subject quickly. "You know what I could use a partner for?" he asked Ben. "Naming the chickens. I've got 12 hens and haven't named a single one. Think you could help with that?" Interest sparked in the boy's eyes. "I could name them?" "Sure could. Every chicken needs a good name." For the first time since they'd met, Ben smiled, a real smile that transformed his cautious face into something bright and boyish. It lasted only a moment before the wariness returned, but Jacob had seen it. The boy was still in there, underneath the protective layers fear had built. Back at the ranch, they tended the injured heifer, settling her in the barn where Jacob could monitor her. Lily insisted on helping, showing no squeamishness as they examined the leg, sprained, not broken, thankfully. "She'll need to stay off it for a week or two," Jacob said. "I'll keep her in the barn, make sure she's comfortable." "I can help tend her," Lily offered. "Check on her when you're doing other work." They were standing close in the barn's dimness, and Jacob became acutely aware of her presence. The smell of horse and hay that clung to her, the streak of mud across her cheek, the capable way she moved through this world he'd thought would be foreign to her. "You're not what I expected," he said before he could stop himself. "Neither are you," she replied. "Your letters were so formal, so careful. I thought you'd be stern, maybe harsh, but you're kind." "Don't mistake kindness for softness," Jacob warned. "This land requires hard decisions. I've made them before and will again." "I don't mistake anything," Lily said. "I know the difference between a hard man and a cruel one. You're hard because you have to be. That's different." The understanding in her eyes unsettled him. She saw too much too quickly. It made him want to pull back, to rebuild the walls he'd carefully maintained for years. But it also made him want to let her keep looking, to be seen and known and maybe, eventually, accepted. Charlie's voice broke the moment. "Found Ben in the chicken coop, Jake. Boy's already named half the hens." They found Ben sitting in the straw surrounded by chickens, pointing to each one with serious concentration. "That's Rosie," he told Charlie, indicating a red hen. "And that's Bella. And that's Princess. And that's—" "Princess?" Jacob interrupted, amused. "We've got a chicken named Princess?" Ben nodded solemnly. "She walks fancy. See?" And indeed, the particular hen did have a rather dignified strut. Jacob caught Lily's eye and saw her fighting a smile. "Princess it is, then," Jacob agreed. "What about that one?" They spent the next hour in the chicken coop, Ben gradually assigning names to each bird, some practical, some whimsical, all delivered with the utmost seriousness. Lily sat in the straw, her ruined dress forgotten, laughing at her son's choices. Charlie regaled them with stories of his own children's animal naming adventures. And Jacob found himself relaxing, letting the simple pleasure of the moment exist without questioning it. When they finally headed back to the house, the sun was past its zenith, and Jacob's stomach was reminding him that breakfast had been hours ago. Lily immediately set about making lunch while Jacob and Charlie tended to the horses. Ben hovered between them, unable to decide which activity interested him more. "Boy's coming around," Charlie observed quietly. "Saw him smile at you when you approved of Princess." "It's his mother's doing, not mine," Jacob said. "It's both," Charlie corrected. "You're good with him, Jake. Patient. Some men wouldn't be." Jacob thought of his own father, stern but fair, not given to softness but present nonetheless. "I don't know what I'm doing," he admitted. "Nobody does it first. You just do it until it becomes natural." "And if it never becomes natural? If I mess it up?" Charlie laid a hand on Jacob's shoulder. "Then you'll mess it up like every other parent in the world, and the boy will survive it because that's what children do. Stop overthinking and just be here. That's all they need, for you to be here and not leave." The word struck deep. For you to be here and not leave. Was that what Lily feared? That he'd give up when things got hard? Send them back to whatever they'd fled? Was that what Ben's wariness was really about? Not that Jacob might be cruel, but that he might simply disappear. At lunch, Lily served a simple meal of bread, cheese, and cold meat, but she'd found some dried apples and turned them into a sweet compote that made everything feel special. They ate at the table, a family of sorts, even if the edges were still rough and uncertain. "I should head out," Charlie said as they finished. "Got my own stock to tend, but I'll be back tomorrow to help Jacob fix that fence line in the north pasture." "Must you?" Lily asked, and Jacob heard the nervousness beneath the politeness. Charlie was a buffer, a third presence that made the awkwardness easier to bear. "Afraid so, ma'am, but you'll be fine. Jake's many things, but dangerous to women and children ain't one of them." Charlie tipped his hat to Lily, ruffled Ben's hair, making the boy duck but not flee, and headed out. The silence after his departure felt thick. Ben retreated to his room with his stuffed horse, leaving Jacob and Lily alone in the main room. "I should clean up," Lily said, reaching for the dishes. "I should help," Jacob countered. They worked side by side, establishing a rhythm. She washed, he dried. The domesticity of it felt strange and right all at once. "What happens now?" Lily asked quietly. "I mean, before Sunday, what's the routine?" "There's always work," Jacob said. "Fences to check, animals to tend, wood to chop. I usually work dawn to dusk, eat when I remember, sleep when I can't stand anymore." "That's no way to live," Lily said with a frown.
It's the only way I know. Well, it's going to change, she said firmly. If we're partners, then we share the work and we take proper meals and we don't work ourselves to death. Agreed? Jacob found himself smiling despite his instinct to argue. Yes, ma'am. Lily, she corrected. And I'm serious, Jacob. I didn't come here to watch you kill yourself with work. Noted. She handed him the last plate, their fingers brushing in the exchange. The contact lasted only a moment, but sent awareness crackling through him. Lily felt it too. He saw it in the quick intake of breath, the way her eyes widened slightly. They stepped apart simultaneously, both suddenly very interested in other tasks. I should check on Ben, Lily said. I should check the chickens, Jacob replied, though he'd checked them an hour ago. They fled in opposite directions, and Jacob stood in the chicken coop feeling like a fool. He was a grown man, for God's sake, not some boy flustered by a girl's attention. But it had been so long since he'd touched a woman, since he'd felt that spark of connection, that his body had responded before his mind could stop it. This was going to be complicated. When he finally gathered the courage to return to the house, he found Lily reading to Ben from a worn book, fairy tales, from the sound of it. The boy was curled against her side, his eyes drooping despite his obvious effort to stay awake. Jacob stood in the doorway, unnoticed, and watched them. This was what he'd asked for, wasn't it? Company, family, an end to loneliness. But seeing it materialize was different than imagining it. These were real people who would expect things from him, need things from him, perhaps eventually love him, or at least try to. The weight of it settled over him like a heavy coat, protective but confining. Lily looked up and saw him watching. He's nearly asleep, she whispered. The day wore him out. He did good today, Jacob said quietly, asked good questions, handled the writing well. He liked you, Lily said, and something in her voice suggested this was significant. He doesn't usually like men. The implication hung there. Whatever had happened at her sister's house, it had involved a man Ben had learned not to trust. I'll try to be worthy of it, Jacob said. Lily carried the sleeping boy to his room, and Jacob busied himself with small tasks, stoking the fire, checking the door latch, anything to avoid the awkward question of what happened now. It was barely evening, too early for sleep, but they had no established routine, no pattern to fall into. When Lily emerged, she seemed to face the same uncertainty. They stood in the main room like actors who'd forgotten their lines. Would you like coffee? Jacob offered. That would be nice. He made it, and they sat at the table, two strangers trying to become something more. Tell me about the ranch, Lily said. How long have you had it? Inherited it 6 years ago when my father passed. He and my mother built it from nothing, came out here right after the war, claimed the land, fought for every acre. My mother died when I was 14, fever. My father lasted another 15 years, but I think part of him died with her. I'm sorry, Lily said softly. It's the way of things out here. People die. You mourn and you move on because the work doesn't stop. He heard the hardness in his voice and tried to soften it. I don't mean to sound cold. I love them both. But grief's a luxury when you've got cattle to feed. No, I understand, Lily said. When Thomas died, I had 3 days before my sister's husband said I needed to find work or leave. Grief had to wait. They sat with their shared understanding of loss deferred, of emotions packed away because survival demanded it. What about you? Jacob asked. Your family? Lily's hands tightened around her cup. Parents died when I was 17. Scarlet fever took them both within a week. My sister Margaret was already married, had her own home. I married Thomas a year later. He was a good man, Jacob, gentle, hard-working. We had 3 good years before he got sick, and then... She stopped, gathering herself. Then we had 2 years of watching him fade. By the end, he didn't even recognize Ben. That's hard on a child. It broke something in him, Lily admitted. He used to be so bright, so talkative. But watching his father deteriorate, not understanding why Papa couldn't play anymore, couldn't hold him, she wiped at her eyes. After Thomas died, we had nothing. I tried to make it work, but without a man to vouch for me, I couldn't get decent work. We ended up with Margaret. And her husband? Lily's face hardened. Robert is a man who believes women and children exist to serve him. He worked Ben like a farmhand, a 5-year-old chopping wood, hauling water, tasks too big for him.
When Ben couldn't do them, Robert would. She stopped, jaw clenched. Jacob felt anger rise, cold and controlled. Did he hurt the boy? Not with fists, Lily said carefully, but words can hurt just as much. He'd call Ben useless, stupid, say he was soft because Thomas had coddled him. And me? She laughed bitterly. I was the widow sister, a burden, eating their food and giving nothing back despite working myself to exhaustion in their house. So you answered my advertisement. I answered 6 advertisements, Lily corrected. You were the only one who responded honestly when I mentioned Ben. The others either ignored that part or made it clear a child wouldn't be welcome. Jacob absorbed this, that she'd been desperate enough to contact 6 strangers, that he'd been the only one willing to take them both. The responsibility felt even heavier now. I meant what I said in my letter, he told her. I'm no father, but I won't turn away a child in need, and I won't hurt him or you. That's a promise, Lily. She met his eyes, searching for truth. I believe you, she said finally. I wouldn't be here if I didn't. The conversation drifted to lighter topics, her asking about the land, him asking about her skills. They discovered shared competencies. Both could handle livestock, both knew basic carpentry, both could shoot if necessary. They discovered differences too. She could sow and preserve food, skills his mother had never taught him. He could track and hunt, skills her city-raised husband had never learned. We might actually make this work, Lily said, almost surprised. Might, Jacob agreed. As darkness fell completely, they established their first evening routine. Jacob checked the animals one final time while Lily prepared for bed. When he returned, she was already in the loft, the lamp extinguished. He settled into his own bed, listening to the house settle around him. Jacob? Lily's voice drifted down from the loft. Yeah? Thank you, for today, for being patient with Ben, for all of it. You're welcome. Silence, then. I think we're going to be all right. Jacob hoped she was right. He closed his eyes and for the first time in years fell asleep to the sound of another person breathing in his house. 2 other people, actually, if you counted the small boy sleeping in the next room. The thought should have terrified him. Instead, it felt like the first deep breath after years of holding his lungs too tight. Maybe, just maybe, they would be all right after all. The days that followed settled into a rhythm that surprised Jacob with its naturalness. Friday morning arrived with Lily already moving in the kitchen before dawn, the smell of coffee and frying bacon pulling Jacob from sleep more gently than any alarm. Ben emerged from his room rubbing his eyes, his stuffed horse dragging behind him, and climbed into a chair without the wariness that had marked his first morning. Sleep better? Jacob asked, pouring himself coffee. Ben nodded, his mouth full of biscuit. Lily shot Jacob a grateful look. The boy had indeed slept through the night without nightmares, a small victory that felt monumental. After breakfast, Jacob announced his plan to ride to town for supplies and to speak with Father McCarty about Sunday's ceremony. The words hung in the air, making the impending marriage suddenly, starkly real. I should come with you, Lily said. If we're getting married, I should meet the priest, and I'll need... She gestured vaguely at her worn dress. Something better than this to wear. Jacob hadn't considered the practicalities. A woman would want a proper dress for her wedding, even one as unconventional as theirs. There's not much selection at Henderson's store, he warned. Most women order from catalogs. I can make do with whatever they have, Lily assured him. I'm handy with a needle. I can alter anything to fit. So they rode to Carbon Springs together, Ben seated in front of Lily on Daisy, the 3 of them cutting across the prairie under a sky so blue it hurt to look at. Jacob found himself glancing back at them repeatedly, Lily pointing out birds to Ben, the boy asking questions in that careful voice that was gradually gaining confidence. Town was busier than it had been on Thursday, with ranch families coming in for their weekly trading. The moment they arrived, Jacob felt the weight of curious stares. News of the mail-order bride had spread, as he'd known it would, and every person they passed seemed to have an opinion written across their face. Mrs. Henderson descended on them the moment they entered the general store, her enthusiasm as overwhelming as predicted. Mrs. Monroe! And little Ben! Oh, what a treasure you both are! Jacob Hart, You're a lucky man. Now, what can I help you find today? Mrs. Monroe needs fabric, Jacob said, for a dress. A dress, of course, for the wedding, I assume. Oh, how wonderful. Sunday, isn't it? The whole town is talking about it. Mrs. Henderson was already pulling bolts of fabric from the shelves, spreading them across the counter in a riot of colors and patterns. Lily's eyes widened at the selection, her fingers reaching out to touch a soft blue cotton before pulling back. Jacob saw her glance at the prices marked on the bolts and watched her face fall almost imperceptibly. The blue, Jacob said firmly, and whatever else she needs, thread, buttons, anything. Jacob, it's too much, Lily protested quietly. It's your wedding dress, he countered, and you'll need everyday dresses too. Pick at least 2 more. I can make over what I have. Lily. He said her name softly, but with enough firmness to make her meet his eyes. Let me do this, please. She searched his face for a long moment, then nodded. The blue, then, and maybe the brown calico for every day, and the green if it's not too dear. Mrs. Henderson beamed, already measuring and cutting. Such practical choices. You'll fit right in here, Mrs. Monroe. Now, young Ben, would you like a peppermint stick while your mama shops? Ben looked at his mother for permission. At her nod, he accepted the candy with a whispered, "Thank you," that made Mrs. Henderson cluck with approval. While Lily selected notions and discussed alterations with Mrs. Henderson, Jacob gathered the other supplies they needed: flour, sugar, coffee, ammunition for his rifle. He added things he normally wouldn't buy: store-bought cookies for Ben, a new hair ribbon for Lily, a bottle of decent whiskey for himself because if he was getting married on Sunday, he might need fortification. At the counter, as he tallied the cost, Mr. Henderson leaned in conspiratorially. Brave thing you're doing, Hart. Taking on a ready-made family. Not many men would. Not many men are lucky enough to get the offer, Jacob replied, surprised by his own words. Mr. Henderson laughed. Good answer. Marriage already making you diplomatic, I see. They left the store laden with packages and headed to the church, a simple white building that served the scattered community's spiritual needs. Father McCarty was in the small garden beside it, tending to early spring vegetables with the care of a man who understood growing things. Jacob! The priest straightened, brushing dirt from his hands. I heard you'd be coming, and this must be Mrs. Monroe and young Ben. Father, Jacob said, we'd like to talk about Sunday, if you have time. For a wedding? I have all the time in the world. Come inside. The church was cool and dim, smelling of wood polish and old hymnal pages. Ben stayed close to his mother, his eyes wide, as he took in the unfamiliar space. Father McCarty settled them in the front pew and sat facing them, his weathered face kind. Now then, he said, Jacob tells me you're from Pennsylvania, Mrs. Monroe. That's quite a journey. Yes, Father, Lily said, but necessary. And you understand what marriage means? Not just the legal arrangement, but the spiritual commitment. Jacob felt Lily tense beside him. This was the question they'd both been avoiding. What was this marriage, really? A business arrangement? A convenience? Or something with the potential to become more? I understand marriage is a sacrament, Lily said carefully, a bond that shouldn't be entered into lightly. I also understand that circumstances sometimes require practical decisions. Jacob and I are both realistic about what we're doing. Realistic is good, Father McCarty said, but marriage also requires hope. Hope that 2 people can build something together, can become more together than they were apart. He looked at Jacob. You've been alone a long time, son. Are you ready to not be alone anymore? The question struck deeper than Jacob expected. Was he ready? Ready to share his space, his decisions, his life? Ready to be responsible not just for himself, but for a woman and child who depended on him? I'm ready to try, he said finally. That's the best I can offer. And you, Mrs. Monroe? Lily's hand found Ben's, holding tight. I'm ready to build a life where my son is safe and valued, where I can work beside a man who respects that work, where we can have a home that's truly ours. If that's what marriage to Jacob offers, then yes, I'm ready. Father McCarty nodded slowly. Honesty, that's a good foundation, better than many marriages start with. He turned to Ben, who'd been silent throughout. And what about you, young man?
What do you think about all this? Ben looked startled to be addressed. His fingers twisted in his mother's skirt, and for a moment Jacob thought he wouldn't answer. Then, in a voice barely above a whisper, "Will we stay? After the wedding, will we stay?" The question gutted Jacob. The boy wasn't asking about marriage or love or any of the abstract concepts adults worried over.
He was asking the only thing that mattered to him. Would this be permanent, or would he be uprooted again? Jacob knelt in front of Ben, bringing himself to eye level. "You'll stay," he said firmly. "Your mama will stay. This is your home now, Ben. The wedding just makes it official, makes it so nobody can ever say otherwise. Understand?" Ben studied Jacob's face with those two old eyes, weighing the promise against past disappointments. Then he nodded, a small movement that felt like a leap of faith. "Well then," Father McCarty said, his voice thick with emotion. "Sunday it is. 2 o'clock, if that suits you. It'll give the congregation time to attend if they wish. And they will wish, Jacob. You know how this town is." Jacob grimaced. He'd hoped for a quiet ceremony, just the necessary witnesses. But the priest was right. The whole town would turn out for this spectacle. As they left the church, Jacob noticed Ben lagging behind, staring at the small cemetery beside the building. The boy's face had gone pale, his breathing quick and shallow. "Ben?" Lily called, noticing. "What's wrong, sweetheart?" "Is Papa here?" Ben asked, his voice shaking. "Did we bring him with us?" Lily's face crumpled. She knelt beside her son, pulling him close. "No, baby. Papa's buried in Pennsylvania, remember? We visited before we left." "But how will he find us?" Ben's voice rose, panic threading through it. "How will he know where we are?" Jacob felt helpless in the face of the boy's grief. This was beyond his experience, beyond his ability to fix. But Lily handled it with the gentle firmness of practice. "Papa's not coming, Ben," she said softly. "He's gone to heaven, remember? But he's always with us in our hearts. He'd want us to be happy, to be safe. That's why we came here, to be safe." "Do you think he'd like Jacob?" Ben asked, and the question nearly broke Jacob's composure. Lily looked up at Jacob, her eyes swimming with tears. "I think he would," she said. "I think he'd be glad someone is taking care of his family." The moment stretched, heavy with emotion and unspoken hopes. Then Ben pulled away from his mother and walked to Jacob, his small hand reaching up. Jacob took it automatically, feeling the tiny fingers wrap around his calloused palm. They walked back to the wagon like that, Ben between them, holding both their hands, a small bridge connecting two adults trying to become something more than strangers. The ride home was quieter, each of them lost in thought. The wedding was real now, scheduled and sanctioned. In 2 days, Jacob and Lily would speak vows that would bind them legally and spiritually. The weight of it pressed down, but so did something else. Possibility. Fragile as new grass, but growing nonetheless. That evening, after Ben was asleep, Jacob and Lily sat at the table with the blue fabric spread between them. Lily had measurements written on a scrap of paper and was sketching a simple pattern. "I'll need to work through tomorrow to have it ready," she said. "It won't be fancy." "Don't need fancy," Jacob replied. "Just need you to feel right in it." She smiled, a real smile that reached her eyes. "You say the right things sometimes, Jacob Hart. Almost makes me think you've done this before." "Never," he admitted. "I'm making it up as I go." "Me too," she confessed. Then, more seriously, "Are you scared? About Sunday?" Jacob considered lying, offering false confidence. But they'd built this fragile thing on honesty, and he wouldn't undermine it now. "Terrified," he admitted. "I don't know how to be a husband. Don't know how to be a father. I'm going to make mistakes." "So will I," Lily said. "But maybe we'll make different mistakes, and they'll balance out somehow." "That's optimistic." "I have to be," she said simply. "Pessimism is a luxury I can't afford, not with Ben depending on me." Jacob watched her fingers trace the pattern, her concentration absolute. "You're a good mother," he said, "in case nobody's told you lately." Her hand stilled. When she looked up, tears glinted in her eyes. "Robert used to say I was too soft on him, that I was raising him weak." "Robert was a fool," Jacob said flatly. "Ben's not weak. He's cautious, and he's got every right to be after what he's been through. But he's brave too. Came all this way to an unknown place with an unknown man. That's courage, not weakness. You see him clearly, Lily said wonderfully. Most people just see a quiet, strange little boy. I see a kid who's had to grow up too fast, Jacob replied, and I see a chance to let him be a kid again, if we do this right. They sat in comfortable silence for a while, the lamplight casting soft shadows across the room. Outside, the night sounds of the prairie formed a familiar symphony, wind through grass, the distant yip of coyotes, the creak of the barn settling. Can I ask you something? Lily said finally. Sure.
Why did you really do this? Write to the marriage agency? A man like you could have found someone local, courted properly. Why take a chance on a stranger? Jacob took his time answering, wanting to get it right. I was dying, he said finally. Not physically, but in every other way that matters. This ranch, the work, it was keeping my body alive, but my soul was starving. I'd wake up and the day would stretch ahead, empty except for chores. I'd go to bed and there'd be nothing to mark that day as different from the one before or the one coming after. It was like living the same day over and over, alone. He paused, gathering his thoughts. I tried to convince myself it was enough. Told myself I didn't need company, that the work was sufficient. But then last winter hit hard. Lost 30 head of cattle in a blizzard. Nearly lost myself trying to save them. I was trapped in this house for 3 days while the storm raged, and the silence nearly killed me. 3 days of nothing but my own thoughts, my own voice, my own failures. Lily listened intently, her sewing forgotten. When the storm cleared, Jacob continued, I realized I could die out here and nobody would know for weeks, months maybe. Charlie might notice eventually, but by then I'd be frozen solid or eaten by scavengers. And worse than dying alone was the thought of living alone for however many years I had left. So I wrote the letter. Desperate, maybe stupid, but honest. Not stupid, Lily said firmly. Brave. It takes courage to admit you need someone. What about you? Jacob asked. You said you wrote to 6 men. Was I really the only one who'd take Ben? Lily's laugh was bitter. One man responded saying he'd take me, but the boy would have to go to an orphanage. 2 offered marriage, but made it clear the child would be a servant, not a son. One wrote back such filth about what he expected from a desperate widow that I burned the letter. The 6th never responded at all. Jacob felt sick. God, Lily, I'm sorry. Don't be, she said. It showed me what I was dealing with. When your letter came, honest, direct, acknowledging the difficulty but not rejecting Ben, I cried. Not sad tears, relief. Someone was giving us a chance. We're giving each other a chance, Jacob corrected. This works both ways. She smiled. Fair enough. The conversation drifted to practical matters. What needed doing before winter, plans for the ranch, ideas for improvements. Jacob found himself surprised by her insights, her suggestions born of real experience rather than romantic notions of frontier life. We should get chickens laying better, she said. With the right feed and care, we could have surplus eggs to sell in town. And that south field, you said it floods in spring? We could dig drainage channels, maybe plant hay there once it dries. You've been here 3 days and you're already reorganizing my ranch, Jacob said, but there was amusement in his voice. Partners, remember? That means I get opinions. So it does. Saturday dawned with a crisis that reminded Jacob exactly why frontier life was never simple. He woke to frantic barking from Scout and emerged to find the dog at the barn door, hackles raised. Inside, the injured heifer was down, her breathing labored, eyes rolling white with pain. Lily, Jacob called, urgency sharpening his voice. She appeared within seconds, Ben trailing behind her. One look at the heifer and she was moving, checking the animal with capable hands. The leg's infected, she said grimly. Badly. Probably got dirt in it when we brought her in, and it's festered. Jacob cursed. He should have checked more carefully, should have cleaned it better. Now the heifer was in real danger, and it was his negligence that had caused it. What do we do? He asked. We need to clean it, drain the infection, pack it with something to draw out the poison, Lily said. Do you have any honey or sugar? Both. Get them. And clean cloths, hot water, your sharpest knife.
They worked together with swift efficiency, Jacob following Lily's instructions without question. She clearly knew what she was doing, lancing the wound, draining the putrid infection, cleaning with water so hot it steamed. The heifer thrashed weakly, but Lily's hands remained steady. "Hold her," she ordered Jacob, and he complied, using his strength to keep the animal still while Lily worked. Ben watched from the barn door, his face pale but fascinated. When Lily called for the honey, he ran to get it, returning quickly. "Good boy," Lily murmured, not looking up from her work. "Now step back, sweetheart. This isn't for little eyes." For an hour they labored, cleaning and treating the wound until Lily was finally satisfied. The heifer's breathing had eased, the wild panic in her eyes subsiding. "She'll live," Lily pronounced, sitting back on her heels. She was covered in blood and worse, her dress, one of her only dresses, ruined beyond saving. "How did you know how to do that?" Jacob asked, awed. "My father was the closest thing to a doctor in our town," she explained, washing her hands in the bucket. "He treated animals and people both. I learned from watching him." "You never mentioned that in your letters." "You asked if I could handle livestock." "I can." Didn't seem necessary to detail how. She looked at her ruined dress with resignation. "I'll need to clean up before I can work on the wedding dress." "You're still going to work on it? After this?" "Of course," she said as if it were obvious. "That heifer needed help. Now the dress needs finishing. Both are important." Jacob felt something shift in his chest, respect deepening into something warmer, something he wasn't quite ready to name. The rest of the day passed in a blur of activity. Lily alternated between checking the heifer and sewing, her fingers flying over the blue fabric with practiced skill. Jacob took on extra chores to give her time, with Ben shadowing him, asking questions about everything. "Why do you talk to the horses?" Ben asked as Jacob brushed Rex. "Helps them stay calm," Jacob explained. "Animals respond to voice, to tone. You talk gentle. They know you're not a threat." "Can I try?" Jacob handed him a soft brush. "Just run it along his side, nice and easy. Tell him what a good boy he is." Ben approached Rex cautiously, then began brushing with tentative strokes. "Good boy, Rex," he whispered. "You're a very good horse." Rex's ear flicked back, acknowledging the small voice, but he stood steady. Ben's face lit up with wonder. "He likes me." "Seems he does," Jacob agreed. "You've got a way with animals, Ben. That's a gift." The boy glowed under the praise, working with increased confidence. Jacob watched him, remembering his own childhood learning these same skills, his father's rare praise meaning everything. That evening, Lily emerged from the small room where she'd been working, holding up the finished dress. It was simple but elegant, the blue fabric draped in clean lines with small tucks at the waist and modest lace trim at the collar that she must have salvaged from her old dress. "What do you think?" she asked, suddenly shy. "It's beautiful," Jacob said honestly. "You're beautiful." The words hung between them, unexpected and weighted with meaning. Lily's cheeks flushed, and she quickly hung the dress on a hook. "I should check on the heifer one more time," she said, fleeing the intimacy of the moment. Jacob let her go, his own heart beating faster than it should. Tomorrow they'd be married. Tomorrow this tentative arrangement would become official. Tomorrow he'd stand before God and the town and promise to honor and cherish this woman who'd been a stranger a week ago. The thought terrified and thrilled him in equal measure. That night, lying in his bed with Lily in the loft above and Ben sleeping in the next room, Jacob stared at the ceiling and wondered what the hell he was doing. Marriage was supposed to be based on love, wasn't it? On knowing someone deeply, choosing them from among all others. He and Lily had chosen each other out of desperation and loneliness. Was that enough to build a life on? "Jacob?" Lily's voice drifted down. "Are you awake?" "Yeah." "I'm scared," she admitted. "About tomorrow. About getting this wrong." "Me too," he confessed. "But we're doing it anyway?" "We're doing it anyway." A pause, then. "Thank you for giving us this chance, for being the kind of man who keeps his word." "You're thanking me before you know if it'll work," Jacob pointed out. "I'm thanking you for trying," she said. That's already more than most men would do." Jacob had no answer to that. He listened to her settle back into sleep. listened to the house breathe around him, and tried to imagine his life a week from now, a month, a year. Would this strange family they were building survive? Would affection grow into something deeper? Would Ben ever call him anything other than Jacob or Mr. Hart? The question swirled until exhaustion finally claimed him, pulling him under into dreams of blue dresses and small boys with guarded smiles and a woman whose strength matched his own. Sunday morning arrived with crystalline clarity, the sky so blue it seemed to mock his nervousness. Jacob woke early and did his chores in a daze, feeding animals and checking the heifer, who was remarkably improved thanks to Lily's care, with mechanical precision. When he returned to the house, Lily was already up, making breakfast with hands that trembled slightly. Neither of them ate much, the weight of the approaching ceremony stealing their appetite. "We should leave by 1 o'clock," Jacob said. "Give us time to get there. Get settled before we get married," Lily finished. "You can say it, Jacob. It's happening whether we speak it aloud or not." Ben appeared dressed in his best clothes, which weren't much, Jacob noted, making a mental list of things the boy would need. The child seemed to sense the importance of the day, moving quietly, his eyes darting between the adults. At noon, Charlie arrived to escort them to town, moral support and witness both. He took one look at Jacob's face and laughed. "You look like you're heading to your own funeral, not your wedding," he said. "Buck up, man. Marrying a good woman's nothing to fear." "Easy for you to say," Jacob muttered. "You've done it before." "Twice," Charlie confirmed cheerfully, "and buried one wife and divorced the other, so maybe I'm not the best source of marriage advice. But I'll tell you this. That woman in there is worth the risk. So's the boy. You know it, or you wouldn't be doing this." Jacob did know it. Didn't make it less terrifying. When Lily emerged in her blue dress, her dark hair pinned up with the new ribbon Jacob had bought, his breath caught. Jacob did know it. Didn't make it less terrifying. When Lily emerged in her blue dress, her dark hair pinned up with the new ribbon Jacob had bought, his breath caught. She wasn't just pretty, she was radiant, carrying herself with a dignity that transcended the simple dress and rough circumstances. "You clean up nice, Mrs. Monroe," Charlie said with approval. "Soon to be Mrs. Hart," she replied, and Jacob heard the tremor in her voice that matched his own fear. They loaded into the wagon, Jacob driving, Lily beside him with Ben between them, Charlie following on horseback. The ride to town felt both endless and too short, time behaving strangely under the weight of impending change. Carbon Springs had turned out in force, just as Father McCarty had predicted. The church was packed with more people milling outside. Jacob recognized neighbors, acquaintances, the merely curious, all come to witness the spectacle of Jacob Hart's mail-order marriage. "Quite the crowd," Lily murmured, her hand tightening on Ben's. "We can still turn back," Jacob offered, though he didn't mean it. "No," Lily said firmly. "We're doing this." They entered the church together, running a gauntlet of whispers and stares. Ben pressed close to his mother, overwhelmed by the attention. Jacob wanted to scoop up the boy and carry him, shield him from the invasive curiosity, but he settled for placing a protective hand on the small shoulder. Father McCarty waited at the front, his expression warm and encouraging. Mrs. Henderson was there, too, beaming as if she'd personally arranged the whole thing. Other faces blurred together, some friendly, some judgmental, all watching avidly. The ceremony began with Jacob and Lily standing before the altar, Ben between them holding on to both. Father McCarty spoke of marriage as sacred union, of commitment and faith, of two becoming one. Jacob heard the words through a haze of nervousness, his mind focused on Lily's hand trembling in his. "Do you, Jacob Thomas Hart, take this woman to be your lawfully wedded wife, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Jacob looked at Lily, really looked at her, seeing the fear and hope mingled in her eyes, the determination in the set of her jaw, the vulnerability in how she held her breath waiting for his answer. "I do," he said, his voice steady despite everything. "And do you, Lily Ann Monroe, take this man to be your lawfully wedded husband, to have and to hold from this day forward, for better or worse, for richer or poorer, in sickness and in health, until death do you part?" Lily's eyes never left Jacob's face. "I do," she whispered. Then by the power vested in me, I now pronounce you husband and wife." Father McCarty smiled. "Jacob, you may kiss your bride." This was the moment Jacob had been dreading, the public intimacy, the performance of affection he wasn't sure he had the right to claim. But Lily solved it for him, rising on tiptoe to press a gentle, brief kiss to his lips. It was over in a heartbeat, chaste and proper, but Jacob felt it like a brand. The congregation erupted in applause, and suddenly they were married, just like that. Words spoken, vows made, a life altered irrevocably. Mrs. Henderson had organized a small reception in the church hall, cakes and coffee, a chance for the town to meet the new Mrs. Hart properly. Jacob endured it with gritted teeth, one eye always on Ben, who looked ready to bolt from the crowd of well-meaning strangers. "Congratulations, Jacob," said Tom Wilson, a fellow rancher. "Bold move, marrying sight unseen. Hope it works out." "It will," Jacob said with more confidence than he felt. Lily was surrounded by women offering advice, recipes, warnings about frontier life, as if she hadn't already proven herself capable. Jacob saw her smile, nod, thank them politely, even as her hand never released Ben's. After an hour that felt like 10, they finally made their escape. Charlie had thoughtfully decorated the wagon with ribbons, a touch of festivity that seemed both sweet and absurd given the circumstances. "Well," Charlie said as they prepared to leave, "you're married now. No backing out." "Wasn't planning to," Jacob replied. The ride home was silent, all of them exhausted by the emotion and spectacle. Ben fell asleep against his mother, and Lily's head drooped toward Jacob's shoulder before she caught herself. "You can lean if you need to," Jacob said quietly. "I don't mind." Hesitantly, she let her head rest against him. The contact was slight but significant, a married couple, learning to share space and touch. When they reached the ranch, Jacob helped Lily down, his hands at her waist, acutely aware that she was his wife now. She was legally, spiritually his, and he had no idea what to do with that reality. Ben woke as they carried him inside, groggy and confused. "Are we home?" he asked. "We're home," Lily confirmed, and the word resonated with new meaning. That evening, after Ben was asleep, Jacob and Lily stood in the main room, suddenly awkward with each other. They were married now, expectations existed, traditions called for consummation, but they'd agreed to wait. Lily gestured toward the loft. "Right," Jacob said, "and They stood there, neither moving. "This is strange," Lily said finally. "Very strange," Jacob agreed. Then they both laughed, tension breaking under the absurdity of it. Married but not, together but separate, committed to something neither fully understood. "Good night, husband," Lily said, testing the word. "Good night, wife," Jacob replied, equally uncertain. She climbed to the loft, and Jacob settled into his bed, listening to her move above him. His wife. The words felt foreign and familiar all at once, weighted with responsibility and possibility. Outside, the night settled over the ranch. Their ranch now, all three of them. Inside, three hearts beat in their separate spaces, bound together by words spoken before God and witnesses, by hope stronger than certainty, by the desperate faith that maybe, just maybe, broken pieces could fit together into something whole. Jacob closed his eyes and tried to imagine the future. He couldn't see it clearly. The path ahead was too uncertain, too dependent on 1,000 unknown variables. But for the first time in years, he wanted to see it. Wanted to wake up tomorrow and the day after and the day after that. Wanted to watch Ben grow and Lily settle and their fragile family become real. It was terrifying. It was exhilarating. It was done. They were married. Marriage, Jacob discovered, changed everything and nothing all at once. Monday morning arrived with the same chores demanding attention, the same cattle needing tending, the same endless work that defined frontier life. But now he performed these tasks with the knowledge that two people waited for him in the house, that breakfast would be ready when he returned, that his solitary existence had fundamentally shifted into something communal. The first week of married life passed in a careful dance of boundaries and adjustments. Lily moved through the house with increasing confidence,
reorganizing the kitchen to her liking, establishing routines that brought order to what had been Jacob's haphazard bachelor existence. She asked permission at first. "Do you mind if I move these provisions to the lower shelf, or would it bother you if I wash the curtains?" Until Jacob finally told her to stop asking and just make the house work however she needed it to. Ben remained cautious but was gradually emerging from his shell. He followed Jacob on morning chores, asking endless questions about everything from why cows had 4 stomachs to how far away the mountains were. Jacob found himself enjoying the role of teacher, rediscovering his own world through the boy's curious eyes. "Why do we have to check the fences every day?" Ben asked one morning as they rode the property line. "Because one broken fence can mean lost cattle," Jacob explained. "And lost cattle means lost money, which means we can't buy supplies, which means we all go hungry. Everything connects, Ben. That's the first lesson of ranch life. Everything you do or don't do has consequences." The boy absorbed this with serious consideration. "So if I don't do my chores, bad things happen?" "Well, chickens might not get fed, eggs might not get collected. Not the end of the world, but it matters. Your mama depends on those eggs for cooking. I depend on the chickens being healthy. See how it connects?" Ben nodded slowly. "I'll be more careful with my chores." "You're doing fine," Jacob assured him. "Better than fine, actually. You're learning fast." A small smile crossed Ben's face before the habitual wariness returned, but Jacob caught it. These moments of breakthrough, brief as they were, gave him hope. The sleeping arrangements remained unchanged. Lily in the loft, Jacob in the main room, Ben in his small bedroom. They existed in careful politeness, married in name but still fundamentally separate. Jacob told himself he didn't mind, that the partnership was working exactly as they'd agreed. But he couldn't deny the awareness that crept in during unguarded moments. The way Lily's hair caught lamplight when she read in the evenings, the sound of her humming as she worked, the accidental brush of hands when they both reached for something. On Thursday, exactly 1 week after Lily and Ben had arrived, the first real test of their partnership emerged. Jacob was working in the barn when he heard hoofbeats approaching fast. Charlie, riding hard, his face grim. "Jake!" he called before even dismounting. "We've got trouble. Mountain lion's been spotted near the Henderson place. Took 2 of their calves last night. Tom Wilson says he found tracks near his north pasture this morning, too." Jacob's blood ran cold. Mountain lions were deadly serious business, especially with cattle vulnerable and a child on the property. "How big?" "Tom says the tracks suggest a big male, probably forced down from the high country by lack of prey. He's hunting Jake, and he's bold enough to come near houses." Lily emerged from the chicken coop, Ben at her side. She must have heard the urgency in Charlie's voice because she moved quickly toward them. "What's wrong?" "Mountain lion in the area," Jacob said tersely. "Charlie, we need to organize a hunting party, tonight, before it takes more livestock or worse." "Agreed. I'll ride to the other ranches, get men together, meet at Wilson's place at sundown?" "I'll be there." Jacob was already mentally cataloging what he'd need, his rifle, ammunition, his best tracking skills. "I'm coming too," Lily said. Both men turned to stare at her. Jacob shook his head immediately. "No, too dangerous." "I can shoot," Lily insisted. "My father taught me." "You'll need every gun you can get." "You'll need to stay here with Ben," Jacob countered. "Keep him safe. Keep the doors locked. The lion probably won't come this close to the house, but probably isn't certain." He saw the argument forming in her eyes, saw her wanting to prove herself capable and useful. But he also saw her glance at Ben, saw the calculation. Her son's safety versus her pride. "Fine," she said finally. "But you take care, Jacob Hart. I didn't marry you just to become a widow again." The words, spoken in front of Charlie, acknowledged their marriage as more than just a legal arrangement. Charlie grinned, but Jacob felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier. Someone cared if he came back. Someone would mourn if he didn't. "I'll be careful," he promised. The afternoon passed in tense preparation. Jacob cleaned his rifle with meticulous care, checked his ammunition, sharpened his knife. Lily watched him work, her face pale but composed. "How dangerous is this, really?" she asked quietly when Ben was out of earshot. Jacob considered lying, offering false reassurance, but they'd built their foundation on honesty. "Dangerous," he admitted. "Mountain lions are smart, fast, and when they're desperate, they'll attack anything. but I've hunted them before. I know what I'm doing. That's not as comforting as you think it is, Lily said. Knowing what you're doing doesn't make you invincible. No, Jacob agreed, but it gives me better odds than not knowing. She moved closer, her hand coming to rest on his arm. The touch was light but deliberate, a connection that had become more common over the past week. Promise me you'll come back, she whispered. Ben's already lost one father. I won't let him lose another. Another. The word hung between them, acknowledging what neither had spoken aloud, that Jacob was becoming more than just the man who'd taken them in. He was becoming family. I promise, Jacob said, covering her hand with his own. I'll come back, Lily. When Ben appeared, asking what was happening, Lily knelt to his level with that fierce protectiveness Jacob had come to recognize. Jacob has to go help the neighbors with something important, she explained. We're going to stay here, keep everything safe while he's gone. Can you be brave for me? Ben's eyes were huge. Is it dangerous? Jacob can handle it, Lily said with confidence Jacob hoped he deserved. He's strong and smart and careful, right, Jacob? Right, Jacob confirmed, meeting the boy's worried gaze. I'll be back before you know it, Ben. You just take care of your mama for me. The boy nodded solemnly, understanding he was being given an important task. I will. I'll protect her. Jacob felt something crack in his chest. This small boy, barely 5 years old, ready to shoulder responsibility far beyond his years because life had taught him that safety was never guaranteed. At sundown, Jacob kissed Lily's forehead, a gesture that surprised them both, and rode toward Wilson's ranch. 6 other men had gathered: Charlie, Tom Wilson, the Henderson brothers, and 2 other ranchers from farther out. They were armed and grim-faced, understanding the stakes. Track suggests he's denning in the rocks above Henderson's north pasture, Tom explained, pointing to a crude map drawn in the dirt. Most likely he'll hunt tonight, come down looking for easy prey. We set up here and here, he marked positions. And wait, when he comes, we take him clean. And if he doesn't come? Asked Sam Henderson. Then we track him at first light, Jacob said. Either way, this ends before more livestock dies or someone gets hurt. They took their positions as darkness fell, spreading out along the likely approach routes. Jacob found himself behind a fallen log with Charlie, the older man's steady presence calming despite the danger. You thinking about them? Charlie asked quietly, meaning Lily and Ben. Hard not to, Jacob admitted. That's how you know it's real, Charlie said. When you've got more to lose than your own hide, that's when you understand what matters. They fell silent, waiting. The night stretched long and cold, every sound amplified. The rustle of wind through grass, the distant call of an owl, the nervous lowing of cattle in the pasture below. Jacob's finger rested near the trigger, his eyes scanning the darkness for movement. Hours passed. The moon rose, casting silver light across the landscape. Jacob's muscles ached from stillness, his eyes strained from searching shadows. Beside him, Charlie remained motionless, a hunter's patience earned over decades. Then, movement. A shadow separating from shadows, moving with liquid grace along the ridgeline. The mountain lion, massive and magnificent, picking its way toward the pasture with deadly purpose. Jacob's heart hammered. He raised his rifle slowly, finding the sight picture, waiting for the others to be ready. The protocol was clear: multiple shooters, clean kill, no suffering for the animal that was only following its nature. The lion paused, its head turning as if sensing danger. In that moment, backlit by moonlight, Jacob could see it clearly, a beautiful creature, powerful and wild, driven by hunger to take risks that would ultimately kill it. There was something tragic in it, this clash between human need and animal survival, neither side wrong but both incompatible. Tom Wilson's shot rang out first, followed immediately by the others. Jacob added his own, the rifle's kick familiar against his shoulder. The lion fell, its death mercifully quick, the combined shots ensuring it didn't suffer. They approached cautiously. Even a dying predator was dangerous, but the animal was gone, its magnificent life ended by necessity. The men stood in a rough circle, hats removed in unconscious respect. Necessary thing, Tom said quietly, speaking the thought they all shared. But still a shame. Better than finding a child mauled, Sam Henderson replied practically, or losing half our herds.
They loaded the carcass onto a wagon. The pelt would be valuable, the meat usable, and began the ride home. Jacob felt exhausted, the adrenaline draining away and leaving only weariness behind. But beneath the fatigue was relief, and beneath that, eagerness to get home to his family. His family. When had he started thinking of them that way? The ranch was dark when he arrived, just past midnight. He tended to Rex quietly, not wanting to wake anyone. But as he approached the house, he saw lamplight flickering in the window. The door opened before he could reach it, and Lily stood there in her nightdress and shawl, her face flooding with relief. "You're back," she breathed. "You're safe." "I promised, didn't I?" Jacob said, suddenly aware of how he must look. Dirty, exhausted, probably smelling of gunpowder and horse. Lily didn't seem to care. She threw herself at him, her arms wrapping around his waist, her face pressing against his chest. Jacob stood frozen for a moment, shocked by the contact, then slowly brought his arms around her, holding her close. "I was so worried," she whispered against him. "I kept thinking about what I'd tell Ben if you didn't come back. How I'd explain that another person he was starting to care about was just gone." "I'm here," Jacob murmured into her hair. "I'm here, and I'm fine." They stood like that for a long moment, holding each other in the doorway, the careful distance of the past week evaporating in shared relief. When they finally separated, both seemed embarrassed by the intimacy. "I should clean up," Jacob said. "I kept water warm," Lily replied, "in case you came back hungry or needing to wash." The consideration touched him. She'd waited up, kept water heating, prepared for his return as if his comfort mattered to her. Maybe it did. Maybe this arrangement was becoming something more without either of them quite realizing when it had shifted. After washing and changing, Jacob found Lily still up, sitting at the table with 2 cups of coffee poured. He joined her, grateful for the warmth and the company. "Tell me what happened," she said. So he did, leaving out the more dangerous details, but giving her the essential truth. She listened intently, her hands wrapped around her cup. "You could have died," she said when he finished. "Could have," Jacob acknowledged, "but didn't." "This life," Lily said slowly, "it's more dangerous than I let myself think about. Every day you go out there, something could happen. A horse could throw you, a cow could charge, a snake could strike. And I'd be here, not knowing, until someone came to tell me." "That's the reality of frontier life," Jacob said gently. "It's why people need each other out here, why they build communities, families. Because facing it alone is harder than facing it together." Lily met his eyes across the table. "Is that what we are, Jacob? Are we facing it together now?" The question held weight beyond its simple words. She was asking if their partnership had evolved, if the careful boundaries they'd maintained were still necessary, or if something genuine was growing between them. "I'd like to think so," Jacob said carefully. "These past 2 weeks, having you and Ben here, it's changed things, changed me. I find myself thinking about you both during the day, wondering what Ben's discovered, whether you need something. When Charlie told me about the mountain lion, my first thought was getting back here to protect you." "Not your cattle?" Lily asked with a slight smile. "The cattle were a distant second," Jacob admitted. "That probably makes me a bad rancher." "It makes you a good man," Lily corrected softly. "A good husband, maybe, if we let ourselves actually be married instead of just pretending." Jacob's heart raced. "What are you saying, Lily?" She took a deep breath, gathering courage. "I'm saying that I didn't expect this. Didn't expect to care about you so quickly. Didn't expect Ben to start looking at you like a father. I thought we'd have a practical arrangement, mutual convenience. But it's becoming more than that, isn't it?" "Yes," Jacob said simply, "because denying it would be lying, and they'd promised honesty. At least for me it is." "For me too," Lily whispered. "And it terrifies me because caring means risking loss again. Tonight, when you were out there hunting that lion, I realized I couldn't bear to lose you. Not because of the practical implications, though those exist, but because I've started to—" She trailed off, unable or unwilling to complete the thought. Jacob reached across the table, taking her hand. "We don't have to name it yet," he said. "We don't have to rush into declarations or expectations. But maybe we can acknowledge that this partnership is growing into something deeper, and maybe we can let it grow naturally instead of fighting it."
Lily's fingers tightened around his. I'd like that. Ben would too, I think. He talks about you constantly. Jacob says this, and Jacob showed me that. You're becoming important to him. He's important to me too, Jacob said. I never thought I wanted children, but that boy, there's something special about him, Lily. He's smart and brave, and he's got so much potential if someone just gives him the chance to bloom. Tears slipped down Lily's cheeks. You see him, really see him, not just as a burden or an obligation. Do you know how rare that is? He's not a burden, Jacob said fiercely. He's a gift. You both are. The words hung in the air between them, a declaration neither had planned but both needed to hear. Lily stood, moving around the table to stand beside Jacob's chair. He looked up at her, this woman who'd arrived as a stranger and was becoming something infinitely more precious. I think, Lily said softly, that we should try being an actual married couple, not rushing into anything physical until we're both ready, but sharing more, being partners in truth, not just in name. I'd like that, Jacob said, standing to face her. More than I can say. They stood close, the space between them charged with possibility. Jacob cupped her face gently, his thumb brushing away her tears. Lily's hands came to rest on his chest, over his heart that was beating far too fast. Can I kiss you? Jacob asked. Really kiss you, not just the peck we shared at the wedding? Yes, Lily breathed. He lowered his head slowly, giving her time to change her mind, but she rose to meet him. Their lips touched, tentative at first, then with growing confidence. It was different from the chaste wedding kiss. This held promise, possibility, the beginning of something real. Jacob felt it in his bones, this shift from arrangement to genuine affection. When they separated, both were breathless. Lily smiled, her face transformed by it. That was, yeah, Jacob agreed, equally incapable of articulation. They stood together a moment longer, then Lily reluctantly stepped back. I should sleep. It's late, and morning comes early. It does, Jacob agreed. But at the base of the loft stairs, he caught her hand. Lily, thank you for taking a chance on this, on me. I know I'm not what you probably dreamed of when you thought about marriage. Dreams change, Lily said. Reality can be better than dreams if you let it. She climbed to the loft, and Jacob settled into his bed, his mind too active for immediate sleep. The day had brought danger and resolution, fear and courage, but most importantly, it had brought clarity. What he felt for Lily was growing beyond convenience, beyond partnership, into something that felt suspiciously like love. It was too soon to say it aloud, too fragile to examine too closely. But it was there, growing in the spaces between them, fed by shared moments and mutual respect and the gradual building of trust. The following days brought a shift in the household dynamics. Lily and Jacob moved around each other with increased ease, the awkwardness fading into comfortable familiarity. They touched more often, hands brushing as they worked, shoulders bumping as they sat together in the evenings, Jacob's hand finding the small of Lily's back as they moved through doorways. Ben noticed, his young eyes missing nothing. Are you and Mama friends now? He asked Jacob one morning as they fed the chickens. I hope so, Jacob said. Is that okay with you? Ben considered this seriously. I think so. Mama smiles more now. She didn't smile much before at Aunt Margaret's house. Well, we want to keep her smiling then, don't we? Yes, Ben agreed. Then, more tentatively, Jacob, can I ask you something? Anything, buddy. If you and Mama are married, does that make you my... He couldn't seem to finish the question, but Jacob understood what he was asking. Jacob knelt down, meeting Ben's eyes. That's up to you, Ben. I'm married to your mama, which makes us family. But you had a father, a good man who loved you. I'm not trying to replace him or make you forget him. But he's gone, Ben said, his voice small. And you're here. I am here, Jacob confirmed. And I'm planning to stay here if you'll have me. You can call me whatever feels right to you, Jacob, or something else if you want. There's no rush, no pressure. Ben absorbed this, then asked, What would I call you if you were my papa? Jacob's throat tightened. Some kids say pa, or papa, or dad.
But like I said, only if it feels right to you. The boy nodded slowly, processing. I need to think about it. Take all the time you need, Jacob assured him. That evening, as they sat down to dinner, Lily noticed the change in Ben's demeanor, the way he watched Jacob with new consideration, the thoughtful expression that suggested internal debate. She caught Jacob's eye with a questioning look, and he gave a slight shake of his head, communicating later. After Ben was asleep, Jacob told Lily about the conversation. She listened, tears sliding down her cheeks. He's trying to figure out where you fit, she said, trying to honor his father's memory while making room for you. That's a lot for a 5-year-old. I don't want to push him, Jacob said. He can take all the time he needs. You're so good with him, Lily said wonderingly. So patient and understanding. Where did you learn that? I didn't, Jacob admitted. I'm just following my gut, hoping I don't mess it up too badly. Lily moved closer to him on the bench, her head coming to rest on his shoulder. You're not messing it up. You're giving him exactly what he needs. Safety, patience, and room to be a child again. Jacob wrapped an arm around her, marveling at how natural it felt to hold her. We're doing it together, he corrected. You're the one who's kept him whole through everything he's been through. I'm just trying to help. They sat like that for a long while, comfortable in each other's presence. The house creaked around them, settling into night sounds that felt increasingly like home. Jacob, Lily said eventually, can I ask you something? Anything. When do you think, that is, how long do we... She stopped, frustrated with her inability to articulate the question. Jacob understood anyway. How long until we're actually married in all ways? He asked gently. Yes, she whispered. I don't want to rush you, but I also don't want us to keep dancing around this forever. At some point, we need to either commit fully or acknowledge that this will always be just a practical arrangement. Jacob turned to face her fully, taking both her hands. Lily, I'm already committed. What I feel for you, it's growing every day. I think about you constantly, look forward to seeing you, miss you when you're not nearby. If that's not the beginning of something real, I don't know what is. Then why are we still sleeping separately? Lily asked, her cheeks flushing but her gaze steady. Because I wanted you to be ready, Jacob said. Wanted us both to be sure this was more than just convenience or loneliness. And are you sure now? Jacob thought about the past 2 weeks. Lily's laugh when Ben said something amusing, her competent hands tending to injuries and cooking meals, her fierce protectiveness of her son, her gradual softening toward Jacob himself. He thought about how empty the house had felt before she arrived, how full it felt now. I'm sure, he said, but only if you are too. No pressure, Lily. We move at whatever pace feels right. She leaned forward, pressing her forehead to his. I'm sure too, she whispered. I wasn't expecting to care for you so quickly, but I do. And I think I'm ready to really be your wife, if you'll have me. Jacob's heart soared even as nervousness fluttered in his stomach. Tonight? He asked. Maybe not tonight, Lily said with a slight smile. But soon. Let's sleep in the same room first. Get used to sharing space before we share everything else. You want to move your things down from the loft? I want us to have the loft, Lily corrected. It's more private. Ben can stay in his room and we can have our own space up there. The practicality of it made sense, but the implications made Jacob's pulse race. Still, he nodded. Okay, we can move things tomorrow. Take our time making the space work for both of us. Thank you, Lily said, for being patient with me, for understanding that I need to move at my own pace. We both do, Jacob said. This is new for me too, Lily. I've never shared my life with someone like this. We're learning together. She kissed him then, soft and sweet, a promise of more to come when they were both ready. Jacob held her close, breathing in the scent of her hair, feeling the beat of her heart against his chest. This was real. This was happening. His life was changing in ways he'd never imagined when he'd written that desperate letter to the marriage agency. He'd asked for a wife to fill the silence, and he'd gotten a family, a complex, beautiful, challenging family that was teaching him what love truly meant. The next day, they rearranged the house. Jacob moved his bed frame to the loft, creating a proper bedroom space. Lily brought her few belongings from where she'd been storing them, and together they made the loft into a shared sanctuary. Ben watched with interest, understanding on some level that this meant his mother and Jacob were becoming a real couple. "Will you still read to me at bedtime?" Ben asked Lily, a hint of worry in his voice. "Of course I will," she assured him. "Every single night. That's our special time, and it's not going to change." "What about Jacob?" Ben asked. "Will he read too sometimes?" Lily looked at Jacob, who nodded. "If you want me to," Jacob said. "I'm not as good at voices as your mama, but I'll try." "I'd like that," Ben said softly. That night they established a new routine. Lily read to Ben while Jacob finished evening chores. When he came in, he found them curled together in Ben's small bed, Lily's voice bringing fairy tale characters to life. He stood in the doorway, watching, his heart full to bursting. After Ben was asleep, Jacob and Lily climbed the stairs to the loft together. The space felt different now, intimate, shared, theirs. They prepared for bed with shy awareness of each other, both changing modestly despite being married. When they finally settled into bed together, there was a moment of uncertainty. They lay on their backs, carefully not touching, both staring at the ceiling. "This is awkward," Lily said finally. "Incredibly awkward," Jacob agreed. They both laughed, and the tension broke. Lily rolled toward him, and Jacob opened his arm in invitation. She settled against his side, her head on his shoulder, her hand resting over his heart. "Better?" Jacob asked. "Much better," Lily confirmed. They lay like that, listening to each other breathe, feeling the warmth of shared space. Jacob stroked Lily's hair absently, marveling at the softness of it, the trust implicit in her allowing him this intimacy. "Jacob?" Lily's voice was drowsy. "Hmm? I'm glad it was you. Glad your letter was the one that offered hope instead of exploitation. Glad we found each other, even if the circumstances were strange." "Me too," Jacob said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "Me too, Lily." She fell asleep in his arms, her breathing evening out into the deep rhythm of rest. Jacob stayed awake longer, adjusting to the presence of another person in his bed, in his space, in his heart. It felt right in a way he hadn't anticipated, as if a piece of himself he hadn't known was missing had finally clicked into place. Outside, the Wyoming night stretched vast and wild, full of dangers and uncertainties that would always be part of frontier life. But inside, in the loft of a ranch house that was finally becoming a home, 3 hearts beat in rhythm, finding safety, building trust, and learning that family wasn't always about blood or even intention. Sometimes it was about desperate choices that led to unexpected grace, about strangers who became essential, about love that grew not from passion, but from partnership, respect, and the daily choice to stay, to try, to build something real from the raw materials of hope and need. Jacob closed his eyes, Lily warm and solid in his arms, and let himself believe that maybe, just maybe, they were going to make it after all. The season turned gradually, spring warming into early summer, and with it the Hart household settled into rhythms that felt less like accommodation and more like genuine family life. Jacob woke each morning to Lily's warmth beside him, her dark hair spread across the pillow, her breathing soft and steady. The intimacy of shared sleep had become natural over the past weeks, though they'd maintained boundaries in other ways, both sensing that physical consummation should wait until the emotional foundation was absolutely solid. It was a Saturday morning in late May when everything changed. Jacob had risen early, leaving Lily sleeping, and was halfway through morning chores when he heard it, a scream from the house, high-pitched and terrified. Ben's scream. Jacob dropped the bucket he was carrying and ran, his heart slamming against his ribs. He burst through the door to find Ben standing in the kitchen, his small body rigid with fear, staring at something coiled near the stove. A rattlesnake thick-bodied and clearly agitated, its tail vibrating a warning that filled the room with sinister sound. "Don't move, Ben," Jacob said, forcing his voice to stay calm despite the adrenaline flooding his system. "Stay absolutely still." The boy was frozen anyway, too terrified to do anything but stare at the snake that had somehow gotten into the house, probably through a gap in the floorboards drawn by the warmth of the kitchen. It was between Ben and the door, between the child and safety, and one wrong move could mean a strike. Lily appeared at the top of the loft stairs, her face going white when she saw the tableau below. "Ben," she breathed, starting to move down. "Stay there," Jacob commanded sharply. "Don't come down. Don't make any sudden movements." He assessed the situation with a rancher's practiced eye. The snake was coiled, but not yet striking, its attention divided between Ben and Jacob. If Jacob could draw its focus, give Ben a clear path to escape, the boy could make it to safety. But it would mean putting himself between the snake and the child, risking a bite that could be fatal if the venom hit just right. There was no question what he'd do. There had never been a question. "Ben," Jacob said softly, "when I say run, I want you to go to your mama. Don't look back, just run straight to her. Understand?" "Jacob, no," Lily said from the stairs, understanding what he was planning. "There has to be another way." "There isn't," Jacob said simply. He grabbed the broom leaning near the door, his movements slow and deliberate. "On 3, Ben. 1, 2. He swung the broom toward the snake, not trying to hit it but drawing its attention fully to himself. The snake's head swiveled, tracking the threat, its body tensing. 3! Run, Ben! The boy bolted, his small legs pumping as he raced toward his mother. The snake, startled by the sudden movement, struck, but not at Ben. It launched itself toward Jacob, who deliberately positioned himself as the target. He jumped back, the snake's fangs missing his leg by inches, and brought the broom down hard, pinning the rattler's body to the floor. "Get Ben outside," Jacob yelled to Lily. "Now!" She didn't hesitate, scooping Ben into her arms and running for the door. Jacob held the snake pinned, reaching for his knife with his free hand. The rattler writhed, incredibly strong, fighting the broom with muscular contractions that nearly broke Jacob's grip. He had to end this quickly before it freed itself. With one swift motion, he released the broom and brought the knife down, severing the snake's head from its body. Even decapitated, the snake continued to move, its nervous system not yet understanding it was dead. Jacob grabbed the iron poker from beside the stove and used it to fling the still-moving pieces out the open door, then slammed it shut and leaned against it, his hands shaking with aftershock. Outside, he could hear Lily's voice, high and frightened, comforting Ben, who was crying hysterically. Jacob took a moment to steady himself, his mind replaying those seconds when the snake could have struck Ben, could have killed the boy he'd come to love as his own. The thought made his knees weak. He found them on the porch, Lily holding Ben tightly, while the boy sobbed into her shoulder. When Jacob appeared, Lily's face crumpled with relief. "Is it dead?" she asked. "Very dead," Jacob confirmed. "It's gone, Ben. You're safe now." But Ben's crying intensified, his small body shaking with the release of terror. Lily met Jacob's eyes over the boy's head, her own eyes swimming with tears and something else. Gratitude, yes, but also a deeper emotion that made Jacob's heart clench. "You could have been killed," she whispered. "But I wasn't," Jacob said, moving closer. "And Ben's safe. That's all that matters." Ben lifted his head from his mother's shoulder, his face blotchy and wet. "You saved me," he said, his voice hoarse from crying. "The snake was going to bite me, but you saved me." "Of course I did," Jacob said, kneeling beside them. "That's what family does, Ben. We protect each other." The boy launched himself at Jacob, his arms wrapping around Jacob's neck with desperate strength. "I was so scared," he sobbed. "I thought I was going to die like Papa." Jacob held him, one hand cradling the small head against his shoulder, the other rubbing soothing circles on the trembling back. "You're okay," he murmured. "You're safe. I've got you." Lily's hand found Jacob's shoulder, squeezing hard, and the three of them stayed like that for long minutes. A family bound together by crisis, by fear transformed into relief, by the undeniable truth that they were no longer just convenient arrangements, but something infinitely more precious. Eventually, Ben's crying subsided into hiccups and sniffles. He pulled back to look at Jacob with red-rimmed eyes. "Will there be more snakes?" "Probably, eventually," Jacob said honestly. "It's Wyoming, buddy. Snakes are part of life here. But we'll be more careful. Check the house better. Seal up any gaps they might use to get in. And now you know what to do if you see one. Freeze, call for help. Don't try to handle it yourself." "I was going to hit it with a stick," Ben admitted. "But then it made that sound and I got too scared." Being scared was the smart choice, Jacob told him. Rattlesnakes are dangerous. Fear keeps us careful, keeps us alive. There's no shame in it. They went back inside together, Jacob carefully checking every corner before letting them fully enter. Lily immediately set about making breakfast, needing the normalcy of routine to settle her nerves. Ben stayed close to Jacob, his earlier wariness completely dissolved in the wake of Jacob's protection. As they ate, Jacob noticed Ben watching him with a new expression, something between awe and affection, the last walls of the boy's caution finally crumbling. When breakfast was over and Jacob rose to continue his chores, Ben followed. "Can I come with you?" he asked. "I don't want to stay inside right now." "Of course," Jacob said, "but we should probably tell your mama first." Ben ran to Lily, who was washing dishes. "Mama, can I go with Jacob? Please?" Lily looked at her son, seeing the need in his eyes to stay close to the man who'd just saved his life. "All right," she agreed. "But you do exactly what Jacob tells you, understand? No wandering off, no taking risks."
"I promise," Ben said solemnly.
They spent the morning together, Jacob working while Ben helped in small ways, holding nails, fetching tools, asking endless questions. But there was a difference now in how Ben moved around Jacob, a trust, an ease that hadn't existed before. At one point, while they were repairing a section of fence, Ben said quietly, "Jacob, can I ask you something?" "Sure, buddy." "Do you love my mama?" The question, so direct and unexpected, stopped Jacob mid-swing with the hammer. He lowered the tool and looked at the boy, seeing genuine curiosity and something else, hope, maybe, that the answer would be yes. "I do," Jacob said, realizing as he spoke that it was absolutely true. Somewhere between the initial letters and this moment, convenience had become affection. Affection had deepened into love. "I love her very much." "Does she know?" "I haven't told her yet," Jacob admitted. "I've been waiting for the right time." Ben nodded thoughtfully. "You should tell her. Mama likes to know things. She doesn't like secrets." "That's good advice," Jacob said. "I'll tell her soon, I promise." They worked in companionable silence for a while. Then Ben spoke again, his voice so soft Jacob almost missed it. "I think I want to call you Pa, if that's okay." Jacob's hand stilled on the fence post. He turned to look at Ben, this small boy who'd lost so much, who'd been brave beyond his years, who was now offering Jacob the greatest gift he could imagine, the title of father. "It's more than okay," Jacob said, his voice rough with emotion. "It would be an honor, Ben. A real honor." Ben smiled, the expression transforming his face into something radiant. "Okay then. Pa." The word hung in the air between them, sacred and binding. Jacob pulled Ben into a hug, holding him close, feeling the pieces of his heart that he hadn't known were broken finally clicking back together.
"I love you, son," Jacob said, the word son feeling natural and right. "You know that, don't you?" "I love you too, Pa," Ben said, his small arms tightening around Jacob's waist. They finished the fence work together, father and son now in truth, rather than just legal arrangement. When they returned to the house for lunch, Lily took one look at their faces and knew something had shifted. "What happened?" she asked, looking between them. Ben beamed at her. "I called Jacob Pa," he announced proudly, "and he said it was an honor." Lily's eyes filled with tears. She looked at Jacob, and he saw his own emotions reflected there, joy, gratitude, wonder at how their desperate gamble had become this beautiful reality. "Come here, both of you," she said, opening her arms. They came together in the middle of the kitchen, the three of them wrapped in an embrace that felt like coming home. That evening, after Ben was asleep, having insisted that both Lily and Jacob read to him, calling Jacob Pa at every opportunity, Jacob and Lily sat together in the loft, the window open to the cool night air. "He called you Pa," Lily said, still seeming to marvel at it. "My son called you Pa." "Is that all right with you?" Jacob asked, suddenly worried. "I know Thomas was his father, and I don't want to—" "It's more than all right," Lily interrupted. "Thomas would be grateful that Ben has someone to fill that role, someone who loves him and protects him. You've given him something I couldn't give him on my own, Jacob, a father's love." "You've given me something too," Jacob said, "both of you, a reason to come home, a purpose beyond just surviving." a family. Lily turned to face him fully, her hand coming to rest on his cheek. Ben asked if you loved me, she said. What did you tell him? The truth, Jacob said, that I love you very much. And do you? Lily asked, her eyes searching his. Really, truly love me, not just care for me or appreciate what I bring to your life? Jacob took her hand, pressing it over his heart so she could feel it racing. Lily, I love you more than I knew it was possible to love someone. You're the first thing I think about when I wake up and the last thing I think about before I sleep. You're brave and strong and beautiful, and you've made my house into a home. You've taught me what it means to be part of something bigger than myself. So yes, I really truly love you. Tears spilled down Lily's cheeks. I love you too, she whispered. I fought it at first, told myself it was too soon, too convenient, that I was just grateful for safety and security. But it's not that. It's you, Jacob. It's who you are. Your kindness, your strength, the way you love my son, the way you make me feel cherished and valued. I love you.
Jacob kissed her then, pouring all his emotion into it. The fear from this morning, the relief, the overwhelming love that had grown from such unlikely beginnings. Lily responded with equal passion, her hands tangling in his hair, her body pressing close. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Jacob rested his forehead against hers. I want us to be fully married, he said. Not just sleeping in the same bed, but truly joined. If you're ready. If you want that too. I'm ready, Lily said, her voice steady despite the magnitude of what she was agreeing to. I've been ready for weeks, just waiting for us both to be sure. And I'm sure now, Jacob. I'm sure of you, of us, of this family we're building. They came together that night with tenderness and care, two people who'd found each other through desperation, discovering that they'd been given so much more than they'd asked for. The physical joining was sweet and awkward and perfect, a seal on the emotional bond that had been growing since that first tentative letter. Afterward, they lay tangled together, Lily's head on Jacob's chest, his arms wrapped securely around her. The night sounds of the prairie drifted through the window, familiar now, comforting in their constancy. Thank you, Lily whispered. For what? For being the kind of man who'd risk his life for a child who wasn't even his, for loving Ben, for loving me, for making us feel like we belong somewhere finally. You do belong here, Jacob said firmly. This is your home, Lily. Yours and Ben's. Nothing will ever change that. She lifted her head to look at him. Promise me something? Anything. Promise me that no matter what comes, hard winters, difficult times, all the challenges frontier life throws at us, we'll face it together, that you won't shut me out or try to handle everything alone. I promise, Jacob said. We're partners, remember? In everything from this moment forward. Lily settled back against him, satisfied. They drifted toward sleep in each other's arms, their bodies and hearts finally fully joined. The following weeks brought a deepening of their bond that showed in everything they did. Jacob and Lily moved through their days with the unconscious coordination of a truly married couple, anticipating each other's needs, sharing the work, stealing moments of affection throughout the day. Ben blossomed under the security of having two parents who clearly loved each other and him, his natural brightness emerging as his fears continued to recede. But frontier life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds, and the test came on a scorching afternoon in late June. Jacob was working in the south pasture, checking cattle in the brutal heat, when he saw the smoke, a dark column rising from the direction of the ranch house. His blood turned to ice. Fire was every frontier family's nightmare, capable of destroying everything in minutes. He spurred Rex into a gallop, racing toward home with his heart in his throat, praying he'd find it was just a grass fire, something small and controllable, anything but what his fears were screaming it might be. As he crested the rise, his worst nightmare materialized. The barn was on fire, flames already consuming the old dry wood, spreading with terrifying speed, and running toward it, carrying a bucket, was Ben. Ben, no! Jacob screamed, but the boy either didn't hear or didn't listen. He was trying to fight the fire with a single bucket of water, his small face set with determination. Jacob launched himself from Rex before the horse had fully stopped, running toward his son. He could see Lily now, too, emerging from the house with more buckets, her face desperate. The heat was intense, the fire already too far gone for their small efforts to matter. "Get away from there,"
Jacob yelled, reaching Ben and physically pulling him back. "It's too dangerous." "But the animals," Ben cried, fighting Jacob's grip. "The heifer we saved and the chickens, they're all in there." Jacob's heart sank. In the chaos, he'd forgotten about the animals still inside. The heifer they'd treated for infection weeks ago, now healthy but still kept in the barn for observation. The chickens that Ben had named, that the boy had come to love. "I'll get them," Jacob said, thrusting Ben toward Lily, who'd reached them. "You stay with your mama, you hear me? Don't come near this fire. Jacob, you can't go in there." Lily grabbed his arm, her eyes wild with fear. "It's too dangerous. They're just animals." "They're Ben's animals," Jacob said. "And that heifer, we fought too hard to save her to let her burn now." He didn't give Lily time to argue further. The barn door was already aflame, but the side entrance might still be passable. Jacob soaked his shirt with water from Lily's bucket, covered his mouth and nose, and plunged into the inferno. The smoke was immediate and choking, stealing his breath and stinging his eyes. The heat was unbelievable, like standing inside an oven. Jacob could barely see, navigating by memory toward where he knew the heifer was kept. He could hear her panicked lowing, smell her terror mixing with smoke and burning wood. "Easy, girl, easy," he called out, more to orient himself than to calm her. His hands found the stall door, fumbled with the latch. The heifer burst past him, driven by instinct toward what she hoped was safety. The chickens were harder. They'd scattered in panic, and Jacob had to chase them through smoke and flames, grabbing them 2 and 3 at a time, throwing them toward the door. His lungs screamed for clean air, his eyes streaming tears that had nothing to do with emotion and everything to do with the acrid smoke. A beam cracked overhead, a warning of imminent collapse. Jacob knew he was out of time. He grabbed the last chicken he could find, Princess, with her dignified strut, now terrified and squawking, and ran for the exit. He made it out just as a section of roof caved in, collapsing exactly where he'd been standing moments before. Jacob stumbled away from the fire, coughing violently, his lungs fighting for air. Strong hands grabbed him, Lily on one side, Charlie on the other. When had Charlie arrived? Pulling him to safety. "You crazy fool," Charlie was saying, but there was admiration in his voice. "Could have gotten yourself killed for some chickens." "Not just chickens," Jacob managed between coughs. "Ben's chickens." He looked up to find Ben standing there, Princess clutched in his arms, tears streaming down his soot-covered face. The boy was staring at Jacob with an expression of pure worship. "You saved them," Ben breathed. "You saved Princess and all of them." "Couldn't let your hard work naming them go to waste," Jacob said, trying to make light of it despite his still racing heart. Lily wasn't having it. Her face was white with fury and fear, her hands shaking as she checked Jacob for injuries. "Don't you ever," she said, her voice trembling, "ever do something that stupid again. Do you hear me, Jacob Hart? Those animals are not worth your life." "They were to Ben," Jacob said simply. The barn burned to the ground, nothing salvageable by the time the fire finally consumed itself. They stood watching it, the Hart family and Charlie, as flames turned their barn to ash and memory. It was a devastating loss. The structure itself, the hay stored inside, the tools and equipment Jacob had accumulated over years. "How did it start?" Jacob asked, his throat raw from smoke. Lily's face crumpled with guilt. "It was my fault," she whispered. "I was melting wax to make candles in the barn where it was cooler. I must have left it too close to the hay. By the time I realized what was happening, it was already spreading." "It was an accident," Jacob said firmly. "Accidents happen, Lily. No one's to blame." "Our whole barn," she said, gesturing at the smoking ruins. "Everything you worked for, gone because I was careless." Jacob pulled her close, uncaring of the soot and ash that covered them both. "It's just wood and hay," he said. "We can rebuild. What matters is that we're all safe. You, me, Ben, even the damn chickens. Everything else is just stuff." "The barn was important," Lily insisted. "We needed it for winter, for storage, for the animals." "And we'll build another one," Jacob said. "Better this time, bigger. Charlie will help, other neighbors too. That's what community does." Charlie nodded agreement. "Already thinking about it, Jake. Between your land's lumber and what we can get from town,
We'll have you a new barn up before first snow. Better design, too. I've been telling you for years your barn was poorly laid out. Despite everything, Jacob felt himself smile. Leave it to Charlie to criticize the barn even as it smoldered. That night, after they'd moved the surviving animals to a makeshift shelter and done what they could to secure their losses, the family gathered in the house. Ben was quiet, processing the day's events with that serious expression he wore when thinking deeply. "Pa?" he said finally. "Why did you go into the fire?" "Mama said it was too dangerous." Jacob considered how to answer, how to explain risk and love and the calculations a parent makes. "Because you loved those animals," he said finally. "And I love you." Sometimes love means doing scary things to protect what matters to the people we care about. "Like with the snake," Ben said, understanding. "You put yourself between me and the danger." "Exactly like that." "What if you died?" Ben's voice was small, the fear underlying his question obvious. Jacob pulled Ben onto his lap, holding him close. "I didn't die, buddy. I was careful. I knew what I was doing, and I made it out safely. But you're right that there was risk. There's always risk in life, especially out here. The important thing is knowing which risks are worth taking." "How do you know which ones are worth it?" "You ask yourself what you'd regret more, taking the risk and something going wrong, or not taking it and living with what you lost. Today, I knew I'd never forgive myself if I didn't at least try to save those animals you cared about. So the risk was worth it." Ben absorbed this, then snuggled closer. "I'm glad you're my pa," he said softly. "I'm glad you're my son," Jacob replied, his voice thick with emotion. Lily joined them, wrapping her arms around both of them. They sat like that for a long time, a family that had survived another test, their bond strengthened by shared crisis. The next days brought an outpouring of community support that humbled Jacob. Neighbors arrived with building supplies, tools, food for the family, while they dealt with the aftermath. The church took up a collection. Even strangers from town contributed lumber and nails. "This is what frontier life is really about," Charlie explained to Lily as they watched men raising the frame of the new barn. "We're all too far from civilization to make it alone. When one family suffers, we all suffer. When one family rebuilds, we all rebuild." The new barn went up faster than Jacob could have imagined, the community working together with practiced efficiency. It was indeed bigger and better designed than the old one, with proper ventilation and a sturdy loft for hay storage. Ben helped where he could, his small hands useful for tasks the men's larger ones couldn't manage. 2 weeks after the fire, they celebrated the barn's completion with a gathering. Families came from miles around, bringing food and music, turning the rebuilding into a proper barn-raising celebration. Jacob stood with Lily, watching Ben play with other children, the first time he'd really had playmates, and seeing him laugh and run with abandon was a gift. "He's different," Lily observed, "lighter somehow, like he's finally letting himself be a child." "He feels safe," Jacob said. "Safe enough to stop being vigilant all the time, to trust that the adults will handle the dangers." "Because of you," Lily said, leaning against him. "You've given him that safety, that trust." "We've given it to him together," Jacob corrected, as he always did. Mrs. Henderson approached them beaming. "What a lovely family you make," she gushed. "Who would have thought a mail-order arrangement would turn into such a love match?" After she'd moved on, Jacob and Lily looked at each other and laughed. "A love match," Lily repeated. "Is that what we are?" "Apparently," Jacob said. Then, more seriously, "Though she's not wrong, I do love you, Lily Hart, more every day." "And I love you," Lily replied, "even when you're being heroically stupid and running into burning buildings." "Especially then?" Jacob teased. "Maybe especially then," she admitted with a smile. As summer deepened into its fullest heat, life at the Hart Ranch settled into prosperous routine. The new barn stood proud, housing animals and hay with room to spare. The cattle thrived, promising good sales come fall. Ben grew taller and more confident, his nightmares becoming rare, his laughter common. And Jacob and Lily grew together in all the ways that mattered. As partners, as lovers, as parents to a boy who called them both by names that had once belonged to different people in different times.
One evening in late July, as they sat on the porch watching the sun paint the western sky in impossible colors, Lily made an announcement. "I think I'm pregnant," she said quietly. Jacob's heart stopped, then raced. "You think?" "I'm fairly certain," she amended. "All the signs are there. If I'm right, we'll have a baby by early spring." A baby. Their baby. The biological seal on a family that had begun in such unconventional fashion. Jacob felt overwhelmed by emotion, joy, fear, wonder, responsibility multiplied. "How do you feel about it?" he asked, searching her face. "Terrified," Lily admitted, "and thrilled, and worried about Ben, how he'll adjust to sharing us, and excited to give him a sibling, and," she laughed shakily, "about a dozen other things all at once." Jacob pulled her close, his hand moving to rest on her still flat stomach. "We'll figure it out," he said, "just like we've figured out everything else. Together." "Together," Lily agreed. They told Ben the next morning, unsure how he'd react to the news that he'd be a big brother. The boy was quiet for a long moment, processing. "Will you still love me?" he asked finally, the question breaking Jacob's heart. "When you have a baby that's really yours?" Jacob knelt in front of him, taking the small shoulders in his hands. "Ben, listen to me. You are really mine. You're my son, as much as any baby your mama and I might have. This baby will be your brother or sister, but it won't change how much I love you. Understand? Promise?" Ben's voice was small. "I promise," Jacob said firmly. "In fact, I'm going to need your help. Babies are a lot of work, and your mama and I are going to need a good big brother to help us. Think you can do that?" Ben's face brightened. "I can help. I'm good at helping." "You are," Lily confirmed, pulling him into a hug. "The very best helper. And this baby is lucky to have you as a big brother." The worry melted from Ben's face, replaced by growing excitement. "Can I teach the baby about the chickens and how to brush horses and all of that and more?" Jacob assured him. "But first the baby has to grow, which takes time. Your mama's going to need us to be extra helpful while she's carrying the baby." "I'll be so helpful," Ben promised earnestly. "The most helpful ever." As the seasons turned toward fall, the Hart household prepared for the coming changes. Jacob worked to ensure they'd have everything they'd need for winter and for a new baby. Lily sewed tiny clothes and prepared the loft for eventually housing a cradle. Ben appointed himself guardian of his mother, following her constantly to make sure she didn't lift anything too heavy or work too hard. One crisp October evening, as they gathered around the table for dinner, Ben made an announcement of his own. "We should have a family name," he declared, "like the Hendersons and the Wilsons. We're the Harts." "We are the Harts," Jacob agreed, unsure where this was going. "No, I mean, we should be called something special. The other kids at church, they say their families have names. Like the Thompsons are the singing family because they all sing. What's our special thing?" Lily and Jacob exchanged glances, both trying to find an answer. What was their special thing? What defined them as a family? "We're the family that didn't give up," Lily said finally. "When things were hard, when we didn't know each other, when everything seemed impossible, we didn't give up. We kept trying, kept building, kept loving each other." "The never give up family," Ben said, testing it out. "I like that." "So do I," Jacob said, reaching across the table to take Lily's hand while his other arm pulled Ben close. The Hart family, who never gives up. It was a promise and a declaration, a recognition of what they'd built from desperate beginnings. They'd been strangers brought together by need, but they'd chosen each other every day since, chosen to stay, to try, to love even when it was hard, even when fear whispered that it was too risky to care so much. As winter approached and Lily's pregnancy became visible, Jacob found himself reflecting on the man he'd been when he'd written that first letter to the marriage agency. Lonely, yes, desperate for company, but also closed off, used to handling everything alone, uncertain he even knew how to let someone in. Lily had changed all that. She taught him partnership, shown him that strength could be shared rather than isolated. Ben had opened his heart in ways he'd never imagined, teaching him that love wasn't about biology but about choice and commitment and showing up day after day. One snowy December evening, with Ben asleep and Lily knitting tiny booties by the fire, Jacob spoke the thought that had been forming for weeks.
"I never knew I was lonely," he said. "Before you came, I mean. I thought I was fine, thought I'd adapted to solitary life. But I was dying inside, slowly, and didn't even realize it." Lily looked up from her knitting. "And now?" "Now I'm alive," Jacob said simply. "You and Ben, this family we've built, it's brought me back to life. I didn't know what I was missing until I had it." "We needed you just as much," Lily said. "We were surviving, but that's not living. You've given us a home, safety, love. You've given Ben a father and me a partner. You've given us both a future we couldn't have imagined." "Strange how desperate circumstances can lead to grace," Jacob mused. "Maybe not strange," Lily said thoughtfully. "Maybe that's how grace works, showing up in the moments when we're most vulnerable, most in need, bringing us exactly what we didn't know to ask for." Jacob moved to sit beside her, his hand resting on the swell of her belly where their child grew. "I asked for a wife," he said, "a practical arrangement to ease the loneliness. Instead, I got a family. I got love. I got everything." "We all did," Lily said, her hand covering his. "We all got everything we never knew we needed." The baby kicked beneath their joined hands, a reminder of the future growing within her, the next chapter of their unlikely family story. Outside, snow fell soft and steady, blanketing the ranch in white. The cattle were settled for the night, the chickens were safe in their coop, the barn stood strong against the winter wind. Inside, in the home they'd built together through choice and circumstance, hope and hard work, 3 hearts beat in rhythm, soon to be 4. The Hart family, who never gave up. The mail-order bride who became a beloved wife. The lonely rancher who became a devoted husband and father. The cautious boy who learned to trust and love again. They'd wanted simple things, safety, partnership, an end to loneliness. They'd gotten so much more. They'd gotten each other, and in getting each other, they'd found themselves. They'd discovered that family wasn't about blood or perfect circumstances. It was about choosing each other every day, about building something real from fragile hope, about loving fiercely enough to risk everything. Jacob held his wife close, listened to his son breathing softly in sleep, felt his unborn child moving beneath his hand, and knew with absolute certainty that his desperate letter to the marriage agency had been answered not just with what he'd asked for, but with everything his lonely heart had secretly yearned for, but never dared to hope he'd find. He'd wanted a wife to fill the silence. Instead, fate had sent him the sound of life itself, loud, messy, beautiful, and perfect. And as he sat there in the warm glow of home and family, Jacob Hart understood that sometimes the best things in life come not from careful planning or perfect circumstances, but from desperate leaps of faith, from strangers who become family, from love that grows in the most unlikely soil and blooms into something extraordinary. The Wyoming wind howled outside, but inside all was warm and safe.